Hello, and welcome to the Album of the Year podcast. My name is Marty, and with me always is my good friend Chris. Chris, how are you this fine Saturday afternoon?
Hey, man, doing fantastic. Saturday afternoon, a better idea than Sunday morning, I think.
Right.
Also, you sounded very smooth that time. Did you notice you sounded very like NPR?
Yeah. It's like,
is that the new you? It's
hello, my name is Marty. We're going to listen to. So it's like, I feel like public radio growing up, it was nothing. The public radio station in Cincinnati, I feel there was WNKU, which was Northern Kentucky University, is kind of like KUTX here. But there was another NPR station that was based in Cincinnati that was nothing but classical music.
Right.
Well, no, it was 90.9 WGUC. It wasn't NPR, but it was the classical station, and all the DJs were like, we just heard the Piano Concerto of Tchaikovsky, number 5. And I remember we were listening to it once because my dad went through this period of like, we're going to listen to classical music because I want you to get cultured. Seriously.
I love the big Midwestern accent. They say, we're going to get culture.
We're going to get, well, and you know, my dad was...
No, it's great. It'd be like my dad would be like, hey, we're going to get culture. You know? That's fine.
So
you are, bro.
So he was super into like Handel's Messiah and,
right.
you know, Mozart and, you know, Tchaikovsky and all that stuff, which is, I mean, it's great music, right?
Right,
but
of course.
WGUC used to get played a lot in those days. And I remember we were listening to it once and there was apparently people would call in and request like any other radio station. And the DJ that was on WGUC was like, that particular piece was requested by a young listener, such and such of Blue Ash, who's only 12 years old, and he is actually one of our many young listeners that call in. And I'm just like,
I love that.
Oh my God.
Like the one time it's happened in 3 years, he's like, so we're really hip here at the classical music station.
12-year-olds, we're turning them on to Stravinsky, and they love it.
He said he was listening to Bobby Brown last week, but now he really wants to hear Carl Orff. I love Garrison Keillor did a hilarious thing I remember seeing, which was like the classical music DJ gets it, like the format switches to a country music station.
Yeah,
and he's like, that was Porter Wagner and the Wagoneers.
Porter Wagner. That was Dolly Parton.
I love it. It was just a little out of your depth there, bro.
Yeah, you know.
That's
Porter
fine.
Wagner.
Porter Wagner is one of the best.
So good,
we will now call him Porter Wagner from now on. Not that we're going to probably be talking about Porter Wagner albums, but that's right. From now on, that's his name.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, cool. So, what have you been up to these last couple of weeks or two?
I guess it's been the big thing is I turned 40. So now I finally am 40 years old.
You finally can look down upon me from your ivory tower.
From way up here. It's 40. You don't know what it's like, man. You turn 40 and the whole world changes. You seem like a child to me now, man.
Right.
Just a child.
You at a feeble 39.
Yeah, this 39. You know how 39-year-olds, right, folks?
Yeah.
They think they know everything.
Yeah, I graduated from high school in 1998.
98.
You graduated in 97? Yeah.
97.
Okay,
yep.
that's what I thought. Okay.
So still 1 year older than you, my friend. But yeah, so I turned 40. I haven't had a big birthday party. I had a big plan for a bash that we were going to do, and scheduling got really messy. And then I realized how expensive it was going to be. Yeah. You know, so I got to figure out what if we're ever even going to do it. So we may have a birthday party in like January or something.
Yeah, hey man.
It's just the struggles of having
having some chillins.
2-month-old kid. Yeah, exactly. The other big things that happened, I mean, honestly, you and I went out and we did something really cool. We kind of touched on it in the lunchtime episode, but I think we could talk about it a little bit more.
Sure.
We went and saw one of our favorite bands.
The Breeders.
At the Scoot Inn, which was great.
Yeah, they were fantastic, man. It was so good.
Yeah.
And it's funny, too, because I guess an acquaintance, but this woman, Tamine, who plays the fiddle, who's played with my friend Graham before, she got up and played with the Breeders when they did Driving on 9, and she got up on stage, and I turned to Chris, I was like, I know her.
Yeah.
Which was
like,
really...
Oh, there goes Marty saying he knows everybody on stage. Well, but no, legit.
It was crazy, man, so that was really neat. And I talked to Graham later this past week, and he was like, yeah, I was supposed to be at that show, but I couldn't make it work. He's a really, really busy guy. But yeah, the show was incredible. Like the sound I thought was very good. And it's been a while since I've been to Scoot Inn. You said you had never been there, right?
No, I'd never been to the Scoot Inn, which seems crazy because apparently it's been around since like 1875 or something. But
I don't. The Breeders weren't playing there back then.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. But it was.
I'm trying to think of who, like Stephen Foster, like who was playing back then. I don't know,
Yeah, what was it even then? I probably
he's a juggler or something. It's just
like jug band. Even,
the thing is,
maybe.
Scoot In just sounds like such a like funny modern sort of jokey name or whatever, and it's like really.
Well, it wasn't the Scoot In back then, was it, or was it?
I don't know.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
Oh yeah, old David Scoot, one of the first guys to settle in the area.
Well, if it was called the Inn, that's a very kind of like inn tavern. That's very kind of like old terminology.
That's
so
true.
maybe, who knows? But yeah, the Breeders were so good. I was really taken aback that they played Gigantic.
Yeah,
and that was amazing. I didn't think I would hear a Pixies song, so that was a really, really nice surprise. They played it in the encore, right?
No, they closed the first set with it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, which is the right place to play.
Right way to play it. I agree. A little disappointed they kind of weren't too heavy on Pod.
I was kind of surprised by that, actually. I mean, they basically, so I'm more of a Last Splash guy than a Pod guy, though obviously I love Pod, and we talked about it at length. Go see our 1990 episode for more details about my opinions on Pod. But yeah, they only really played "Fortunately Gone" and didn't they close with when it was a paint? Yeah. So I was a little no happiness is a warm gun, no Hellbound, which is a bit of a surprise, no Doe. So we're both sitting there going like, come on, Hellbound and Doe are our two favorite songs on that album.
Seriously, and I think very kind of cornerstone Breeders songs, but. That's okay. It was still.
I mean, for me, they played darn near everything from Last Splash.
For sure.
Almost everything. I think they didn't play Flipside, and they didn't play. There was one other track that they definitely didn't play, but almost everything else was played, which is great. It was all stuff that I'd love to see.
When they played Divine Hammer, I thought that was as close to. Like it was just I recorded like a 20-second video of them playing Divine Hammer, and I've watched it over, like I posted it on Instagram and stuff, and I've watched it probably 30 times. It's so good, man.
It is so good. That drumming is so cool too. Like I love it, and it's just such a well composed song. And everything. It's just the best.
It is, and kind of has some of that sexuality to it too.
Absolutely does,
which is interesting, which is always kind of we touched on in the 1990 episode as well.
Yeah, but ambiguous enough that it could be about justice or something else too.
Exactly.
You don't quite know.
Exactly.
It's just a great track. And
Agreed.
Cannonball sounded great.
Cannonball sounded so good.
Not that I really thought Cannonball wouldn't, but that song is so loose and like crazy that I always kind of thought, like actually, the first band that I ever tried to put together was called The Broken Fans.
The Broken Fans.
The Broken Fans. And it was very much in keeping with like the 90s, like the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, I get some of those bootlegs.
The Spin Doctors. The Gin
Wait a
Blossoms.
second. Did you just admit that the Spin Doctors were naming inspiration?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Okay. Actually, you got to admit, Spin Doctors is a great name.
It's a pretty
for
good name. Yeah.
Yeah. It's.
I mean,
I liked the Spin Doctors back then.
Their first album had some songs on it, Jimmy Olsen's Blues and all that. Like it was kind of interesting. Like they had
as
whole,
a pop rock band, they were fine. Like if all those pop rock bands from the late '80s that I hate sounded like the Spin Doctors, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like the second album though. Like I liked them. I actually saw. Okay. Yeah. I don't really want to open up talking about seeing the Spin Doctors, but I did. Like as when I was a teenager, I saw Spin Doctors, the Gin Blossoms, and Cracker together.
Wow,
and the
that's
bill
perfect.
Went Cracker. Opened for Gin Blossoms, open for Spin Doctors. It should be the other way around, totally the other way around. Because Cracker is an incredible band, and I still really love Cracker.
Right.
And the Gin Blossoms' first record is okay. You know what I mean? That's such a tragic story behind the Gin Blossoms.
Miserable experience.
Right.
What's the? I don't know the story.
That's a really sad. So I'll give you the capsule version, but basically their songwriter, their primary songwriter, was a terrible alcoholic, and he wrote all of those songs. And he basically, the record company picked them up and pushed the alcoholic guy out because he couldn't keep it together. And then he died. Like he died right after his band. So his material is what gets the band to the top, and he gets to be a part of it and drinks himself to death.
That's kind of really sounds miserable. Like the Blues Travelers bassist.
Oh, did that happen with him too?
He kind of went down the same path. He didn't get pushed out by the label or anything, but he just had this destructive, addictive personality. And as dumb as this sounds, the Blues Traveler behind the music goes into really explicit detail about his troubles and stuff. And he was a very, very good bassist. But all the other guys in the band were like, "Are you kidding?" Because John Popper was talking about, losing weight and getting like gastric bypass, and like the doctors told him if he didn't lose weight, he was going to die and that kind of thing. And I guess like the bassist, and forgive me, I cannot remember his name. I might look it up here in a second, but
I don't think it matters.
he said he told John Popper, like, after I think the Straight On Till Morning album, like after they got done touring on that album, he was like, yeah, I'm gonna move to New Orleans. And he was like, and John Popper was like, you're gonna move to New Orleans?
Yeah.
And he said, that's like me moving into a McDonald's. That's what he said. It's like, really? You're gonna move to New Orleans? No, you're not. Come on. Like, what? So I can't remember if he passed away or not. It's obviously been a while since I've really taken the time to research Blues Traveler.
Yeah, well, another thing about old Blues Traveler.
What's that?
Sister band was the Spin Doctors.
Really?
So, yeah. They like worked together coming up. Or at least I think on the Pocket Full of Kryptonite, they call out Blues Traveler and some,
Really?
they played shows in the early days.
I can see that. I can see that.
So,
I will say that Little Miss Can't Be Wrong, the lyric that the one bar where he's like, I hope them cigarettes are going to make you cough. I hope you heard this song and it pissed you off.
Yeah.
That's good, man. That's
that
good
is
songwriting.
That is actually really good. Really. I mean, actually, I like Little Miss Can't Be Wrong. I think it's pretty fun. Even the intro line, even though it's borderline offensive, but is actually pretty good. Like, been a whole lot easier since the bitch left.
Yeah.
Like, it tells you exactly who that guy is the moment the line comes out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So, but anyway, yes, the Spin Doctors, not really trying to defend them, but we were the Broken Fans anyway. So the Broken Fans, what was I talking about? The Broken Fans.
You were saying how kind of like you were trying to name like the something, the Smashing Pumpkins.
We were so like clueless.
Sorry, guys.
We were so clueless because we didn't know, we couldn't really play very well yet or anything.
Yeah.
So we made a list of songs we wanted to perform, right? Like, these are the songs our first set.
Right.
And I
All
just
About
remember
the Benjamins, track one.
Yeah, no, this is even before that. This was like 1993, 94 or something.
Wow.
Like real, I had a guitar, but I couldn't play it yet.
Before P. Diddy, before the Surge Stakes,
remember,
before all of that stuff.
I remember two songs that were on that list. Cannonball, which is so weird. Like, it's so weird. Like, how you, like, even the Breeders, Kim had to have like her own microphone to do the check, and all that stuff, right?
For sure.
Like, so you've got to do like all this effects processing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty like a garage band that's kind of punching above your weight, right?
For sure.
And then the other one was Lemon by U2. Could you imagine a little garage band?
The Zeropa.
Yeah, Can you imagine trying to I'd try to attempt that song
synthesizers in it and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
like, I wouldn't do that, like, and after 20 years of experience, I wouldn't try to do that song, and that's on my list. So,
wow.
The reason I brought that up is that since then I've always thought about like Cannonball as being this like really hard to perform song, right? Man, they 100%. They knocked it out like champs.
They did. Great. They were amazing, and it's interesting you brought that up because the Onion, the AV Club that you've brought up before. Right. They do that Under the Influence series. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. Courtney Barnett does. She covers Cannonball with her band on that, and it's really good.
Oh, I'll have to check that out,
man.
I love that series. I love it, especially when you get into like December and everybody's like Gwar shows up and does the song nobody else wants to do or something.
They really covered hilarious. Gwar came in before Odorous died. They came in and did Carry On My Wayward Son. It's so good.
Stop listening to this podcast right now. Go watch Gwar doing crazy stuff, because I think they would show up every year and do like different.
Oh, for sure.
I can't remember what they do, but it was all. I think they did Get Out of My Dreams, Get Into My Car.
That's great. Have you ever seen them live?
No.
Oh my God.
No.
Dude, I've seen them a couple of times.
Really?
Uh-huh. And the last time I saw them was 2010 maybe.
Yeah.
And every show they decapitate someone, like they have this like dummy.
It's like an Alice Cooper thing.
Sarah Palin decapitated. It was amazing because Odorous was still alive, and he was like, if any of you are worried about Sarah Palin becoming our next president, you'll have to worry no more. And they chop her head off, and they hold her head off as it like squirts blood into the crowd. Like, it was. Oh my goodness. So my friend Alan, who I was at that show with, it was Fun Fest, and he was like, yeah, I've seen him decapitate everybody. Like, I've seen him decapitate like Bush and Obama and like everybody, like nothing's sacred.
Yeah. It's not a statement. It's just,
exactly.
That's kind of what was great about Gwar. It's just, I don't know. I've always heard that the shows are fun, but I just
fun.
don't, don't know the music well enough or care enough to do it.
And I mean, it's kind of a spectacle. I feel like everyone should see them. If you're a fan of live music, you should see them at least once, kind of thing.
Yeah. I could get that. My brother-in-law has seen him, and every time they came to town, he was always like, "We gotta go see Gwar." And I'm like, I got stuff to do, bro.
Yeah, there was
really
this dude
needing to
that
hear Jack the World live. I guess
there was this guy I knew in junior high named Craig Glarden. And he was this guy that was very kind of like Joey, who I talked about a couple episodes ago. He's very much a guy who like moved freely among the tribes and was very into hip hop and very into metal and all this stuff. And he had a Gwar shirt on at school one day, and I was like, "What's Gwar?" He goes, "Oh man, they're funny as hell." That's how he described them. You got to go see them. They're funny as hell. And like he somehow had all these nice clothes, and I don't know how. It's kind of interesting, man. I'm not really sure. That guy, I think, has a pretty weird story, but
yeah. I mean, when I think of Gwar, I just think Beavis and Butthead loved them, but they loved them like they didn't get the irony.
Yeah,
they like took it straight at face value, and it was like the best band ever. And that's like to me one of the most hilarious jokes of the '90s.
Supposedly, they were all art students or something.
That doesn't surprise me one bit.
And Gwar was their thesis.
Yeah,
as how they like saw the world and stuff. I don't know how true that is.
So I was a theater kid in school and stuff. So it does not surprise like one bit. Like if I had just had the idea of, hey guys, let's all build crazy monster costumes and do like performance art, and heavy metal. Like we could have probably done the same thing.
Exactly. It's one of those things that you're like, I can't believe I didn't think.
In fact, I've got there's like a whole because their whole premise is like aliens that want to kill people, right, or whatever.
Kind of,
or like basically aliens who have like a musical thing, but like a contentious because Man or Astro Man does something similar.
Oh yeah,
right?
Man or Astro Man, yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
I actually had my own like before I heard of it. I had heard of Gwar, but I didn't know enough about him really.
Right.
Like me and a friend of mine, Zane, have a band called the Martian Armpit Orchestra. Same kind of deal. Like the whole premise was that it was like a Martian band, but they were kind of like introducing people to Martian music or whatever, And then I heard about Man or Astro Man, and they kind of had a similar thing, except the music didn't sound the same because ours were more just silly comedy songs. But it was. I'll have to play you some of that sometime.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man.
Yeah, but no, the thing that was frustrating, that Last FM, right? Was it Last FM?
Last.fm, it was like the MySpace of music, kind of.
Right. And but you could like tie into it, and if people like listen to your album, like it would add a play. It would play like you could tie it into your iTunes or something. So if you played a song, then it would go to like a count, and you could see how many people are listening to the Beatles or how many people listen to such and such song. So one time I was like, I'll check out, like this was like 10 years after college and everything. Right. So we had been in our band, like my band was Steph, my own stuff, Stephanie's own stuff. But we had recorded like a little EP for the Martian Armpit Orchestra and just sort of gave burned copies to friends.
Oh.
The most depressing thing ever was that I went on and I saw my old band. Then there were like 100 plays or something, and then it was like my music. It was like 20 plays. Yeah. The Steph's music was like 150 plays, and then the Martian Armpit Orchestra had like 1,000 plays.
What?
I'm not even joking. I think there were like 2 or 3 people who listened to it to death.
Just that,
yeah. But it was like my most successful musical project was the Martian Armpit Orchestra.
Dude, I don't know. I feel like that's something to hang your hat on. I would be proud of that. Not to say that your other stuff was bad or anything like that.
But it was like, like you really like, this is the music I care about, that I come to grips with, that I love, that I mean, and the song that people love is the freaking Mars is Made of Chocolate Fudge song.
What's it called?
Mars is Made of Chocolate Fudge.
Oh my God.
I should play you some of it.
I want to hear it,
ridiculous.
Chris.
It's actually, the singer we have on it is really good. It was a friend of mine named Elena, and she's like an opera singer now or something. Yeah, she's like legit all the way. But she could do kind of like a Christina Aguilera thing. Yeah, she's so good. And the song was like supposed to be like the Martian tourism board or whatever, like hired the band to do like
press and
do press. It was like Mars is made of chocolate fudge. fudge, trying to get people to come visit or
my
whatever.
God.
It's really sad. But then at the end, we like threaten to eat everybody who comes to town. It's like, so it's just really
I
ridiculous.
thought you were going to tell me that like 3 people listened to it and that's why it was depressing, but
No, it's depressing because that's the most
people liked it
successful
even
thing.
more than everything
Yeah,
else.
so all the songs where I'm like coming to grips with my feelings, forget it.
Yeah.
But that Martian stuff, what can I say? People like it,
Press that on vinyl, man.
But I really do think it was like one person or one or two
Just, like,
people listening to it a
listening to it
whole
over and
bunch.
over and
Yeah,
over
yeah.
again.
Because it wasn't like it just makes me it make me think that if I had to go back in time, I would put all my energy in the Martian Armpit Orchestra because that's what people responded to.
Sure.
It's still depressing in a way.
So my mom got me the book Closer You Are for my birthday. It is the official biography of Robert Pollard of Guided by Voices. And it's very, very good so far. I'm only about 30 pages in, but it's really, it's basically his life from the time he was like 8 years old all the way through Guided by Voices and stuff. And I've gotten to the point where he's in college right now and he's like playing baseball, but still trying to like keep a foot in music. And it's kind of interesting because he was kind of raised as his dad wanted him to be this really, really great athlete. And he was, and he pitched like 10 no-hitters throughout his entire baseball career.
Holy
and
cow.
one of them was for Wright State University. It's the only no-hitter in the history of that school's baseball team, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And another thing that was really striking to me, which I did not know. So he's a visual artist too, right? And he said that when he was young, he would always have these dreams where he would be in a record store. And there was not only were there no staff in the record store, there were no customers. But he said that the record store was just head to toe, nothing but 12 inches and 45s that were album covers that didn't exist in the real world and that he had never seen before. So when he'd have that dream, he would want to like create his own album covers. And before he was even a musician, he was making these album covers for these fake bands.
Wow.
And it just sounded incredible.
It also kind of explains why Guided by Voices have 175 albums or whatever. He's just trying to crank those imaginary albums and put them into the
pretty
real
much,
world.
Yeah. He's written over 3,000 songs, dude.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's staggering. It's
like Steph
incredible.
is incredibly prolific.
I
She
remember you
plays a
telling me that,
lot. She writes a lot of songs. She's probably got between 300 and 500 songs, and most of them good. And I think of her as prolific, but good grief, 3,000? That is nuts.
It's nuts.
We're getting to Prince territory at that point, right?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And writing 300 to 500 songs is a very, very, very fleshed out musical career.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah.
But 10 times that? Like, what? So, but yeah, it's very good, man. It's very interesting. If you want to borrow it when I'm done, you're more than
I
welcome.
got to get into Guided by Voices more.
Very tough egg to crack.
Yeah, it is. I always kind of compare them to The Fall, where it's like you just don't know where to start. There's so much to get into that it's like, and I've had people like Mag Earwig or whatever. Like I've got a couple that I've listened to but what happens is it's like you listen to one and it's all right. I just haven't found one that gripped me yet.
Yeah.
But I know that I will like it once I kind of figure it out. But the problem is you're like, well, am I listening to the right one? Am I? Maybe I should
and
listen
that's
to
the kind of thing. They're one of those bands where so here's what. So there's the lo-fi stuff, which was the first, like the 4-track recordings, which go up to maybe so the B1000 was their first proper album. And then after that, I think they actually got signed to Matador, and then they made a couple more albums. Apparently when they got signed to Matador, they would just take their recording money and just blow it on getting drunk and stuff or whatever, and they would make 4-track albums, and like Matador was cool with it because they were amazing songs and it didn't matter. So but then they started getting a little slicker with like Mag Earwig and like Alien Lanes was one of the albums that kind of started to go in that direction, but was still very much like lo-fi and kind of grungy and garagey and stuff. But Mag Earwig was probably the first album that had some higher production value, and then Earthquake Glue, I think, was them dipping a toe right into that world. But that album, I think, still maintains some of that sensibility still.
Cool.
So it's.
Well, I'm glad that you got that because I mean I know you're a huge Guided by Voices fan.
Got a Guided by Voices tattoo. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like so that's probably a great one. I'm getting a Gretsch guitar for my 40th birthday. So Steph was really cool and said she wanted, and I've been eyeballing these guitars for like 17 years. And Steph actually pointed out to me that I haven't bought a new guitar for myself. Like since I was a teenager.
When you told me that, I was really surprised.
Yeah, no, I kind of was too because I have lots of guitars.
You do,
but I've bought guitars for Steph, and then like I've been kind of lucky to my dad buys guitars and plays them for a little while and then gives them to me.
Oh, really?
And they end up being like really good guitars. And one of them I got as a college when I graduated college. So I guess I get guitars as presents. It makes me sound like such a fortunate son or whatever. But I've always had what I needed, except I've always been eyeballing that big rockabilly guitar. So it's finally going to happen.
Things are awesome. So we were eating lunch the other day at work, and Chris was telling me about the Gretsch, and I asked him if I could play it when he got it, and he was like, "Fuck no, man! You don't play another man's guitar." And I was like, okay, I'm 70% sure he's joking, but maybe not. And then there was a 5-second pause, and then he was like, "No, I'm joking. You can play it." It's
of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I always said that's Chris's dream guitar, and I always said that my dream. I play bass a little bit, and the Fender Geddy Lee signature bass, Geddy Lee from Rush. The signature, he has a Fender signature bass. That's my dream guitar that I would buy. The first thing I would buy if I just got a fuckload of money and I was able to just spend $1,000 at the drop of a hat. I'd get that thing and plug it in immediately and just start going to town, man. It's a dream, but I'm excited for you, man. I'd love to. Yeah.
I'm really excited. When I get it, I'll let you plug it in and play for sure.
Sounds good, man.
No, I think I said, you don't ask a man to play a guitar. It's like asking to borrow his woman or something. What did I say?
So years and years and years ago, I dated this girl who was a musician, and she referred to playing someone else's guitar as fucking their wife.
Yeah.
You ever heard that?
I've heard musicians say that. I think they're being really corny when they say that because it's not true. It is true that when someone plays your guitar, it kind of puts you on nails a little bit. Or, you're kind of on edge. Like, all right, is he going to start beating the heck out of it? It is. Because guitars are very special to you. But I don't think you should be that precious about it.
Right. And she wasn't even, she didn't express opposition to the idea because I remember as she went to Kent State and it was I met her through Graham and she went to Kent State and Graham lived up there in Kent for a while, and that's where he met his first band, the Whiskey Hounds, that he was in. But we were out in their kind of bar scene area. There was this woman who always just sat outside the bars and played guitar, and I can't remember her name, but she went up. My girlfriend at the time went up to her and was like, "Hey, such and such, can I fuck your wife?"
Oh my god!
Asking if I could play her
guitar.
Yeah. So it's so crazy, man. But
one of those inside jokes that you just got to make sure everyone in the room gets it.
Yeah. And I want to say she explained that to me the day before. Fucking your wife is playing someone else's guitar.
Yeah.
All right, whatever.
I mean, I've heard people say that stuff, but it's I like I said, I think that's being way too. Unless you're like BB King and someone wants to play punk rock on Lucille, you know what I mean? Forget it.
I agree. Can I play
guitars
your
are tools,
$300 Epiphone acoustic? Fuck your wife. No,
yeah, come on, get out of here.
That's so funny. So
awesome, man. So I think it's been a pretty good couple of weeks. Oh, one last thing that I'm just going to briefly touch on. Okay. Last night, I had the hottest hot sauce in my life.
Really?
Yeah. Corey, our buddy Corey from work.
Dooley.
Yeah, Corey Dooley organized a thing where we were all going to have
I forgot about that.
The hottest hot sauce. It's called Fiery Fool. And it's like Carolina Reaper and some Trinidad Scorpion. And there's no extract in it, but it's a puree. And it's like the hottest pureed hot sauce there is, apparently.
Hottest pureed hot sauce.
Yeah. So you can get hotter with extracts, right? But at that point, the heat can ramp up really, really high. But but I'm not like a hot sauce guy necessarily. But I wanted to bring it up because it was fun. I took it like a champ.
Yeah.
I put enough of it on a cracker and everything. Everyone was saying do it with a toothpick and stuff. But we spread it on a cracker and took a big bite of it. It was hot. But you know what's
you got
hotter?
through it. What's
I
that?
got through it just fine. We had that dang hot chicken at
Really?
T22. And here's the thing, like I think that's hotter not because the spice is actually hotter, but because there's more of it and you're getting it all over your lips and everything, and it's like going down. So just
You're
at least
eating like on the chicken. It's the rub that's on the chicken, right?
Right. So I kind of felt like the other day, Marty, I was going to get like the just normal hot or whatever.
Yeah,
and Marty and Courtney were like, what? Like, we're going to get dang hot. I'm like, fine, I'll get dang hot. Fine. So it's like, and then I went back and got dang hot again. So
that's for you on your birthday.
Exactly.
It's
so,
good, man. It's not too bad.
It's really, it's pretty hot, but it's like you got me like up to the level. Like you were like my coach, you kind of coached me up to the level to be ready for this thing.
We're going to put you in the game. We're going to put you on the,
put me in, coach.
That's right. You're going to start at linebacker this Saturday, man. You're going to be fine. I promise. So T22, Tumble 22, it's a hot chicken restaurant here in Austin. And I think Chris and I is probably our favorite restaurant. Like if we had to co-sign off on a favorite restaurant, the both of us, that'd probably
absolutely
be it.
That would be it.
But it's delicious. It's very, very, very good. And they have different spiciness levels for their chicken. And there's dang hot is what is it? It's like the second most
hot,
spicy one. And
there's one called Fire in the
Fire
Hole.
in the Hole. That's the hottest one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite good.
So all the pictures, they show like a chicken with flames coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Fire in the Hole. He's got flames coming out of his mouth.
And his anus.
Yeah. That's how hot that is. I think that may not be a selling point for me.
Combust. Yeah. That's really, I don't know. Your chicken better be pretty good if they imply you're going to be shitting fire later. Like let's be honest here. And it is
it's
good.
It's a cost benefits analysis that you got to do when you're thinking about basically farting flames for the rest of the day.
Oh, that's amazing, man. So something else I wanted to bring up too. So I was doing some research last night for our episode here today, and are you familiar with Jerry's Vintage Guitars? It's a vintage guitar shop in Los Angeles, and they have a YouTube. A lot of musicians come in and like.
Oh,
I
have seen that. Yeah.
So. Our good buddy Post Malone went into Jerry's Vintage Guitars. Yeah, and I've been very critical of Post Malone and still am. I certainly don't care for his music, but he can actually competently play the guitar.
Really?
Yes. He was
Post
playing
Malone.
Yeah, and he was playing this like bluesy kind of riff. I mean, it was easy stuff that probably any guitarist can do, but I guess he actually can play an instrument. So,
all right. So, roll on that Post Malone Unplugged. Let's see if it.
I mean, I'm still not going to go out and listen to his music, but he was like really nice, and he had like 4 security guys with him, but like was very much like people were coming up to him and talking to him and stuff, and I don't know, like it's kind of
funny.
It is kind of funny because sometimes I feel maligned with that kind of celebrity culture, especially like with SoundCloud rap or whatever, and then to find out that like, oh, maybe this guy's not so bad. It's kind of it kind of in a strange way like makes me have faith in the world and makes me hate the world a little at the same time.
No, I kind of feel the same way because sometimes it's like this guy, like, I don't know. It's a complicated feeling. When we get to like the boy band era, we're going to get to have a lot of talking about guys who sell their soul and then try to buy it back.
Exactly.
And I think that's that is kind of a part of the celebrity culture now.
Well, what's interesting though is these SoundCloud rappers aren't really selling their soul. I mean, it's all just like they're just putting out this underproduced, mumbly music, and people somehow like it. You know? It's like I don't know. If
there is something
really
punk rock about it, and that's the one thing. The problem is that to me, punk rock, it's an ethos. There's so much more to it and everything. And I've never figured out what this mumble rap ethos is, other than just Gucci Gang or something.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem that I have with it. It's like I don't mind the stripped down thing. I have questions about whether it's really all that great musically. Fine, but if it was about something I could respect, then I think I could see it as like a punk rock thing. But,
and it's like. I don't know. What was I was trying to figure out how I was going to like throw away everything. Well, and it's like I said in one of the episodes how, you know, we were talking about something, and I was like, I don't even like SoundCloud rap, but that's more interesting than this.
Then Florida Georgia Line.
Yeah.
That's another story I wanted to tell.
Oh yeah,
Florida Georgia Line. I won't say his name, but we were talking about Florida Georgia Line. So the guys at work are listening to the podcast now. So shout out to everybody from our
in
work.
Chris's department, they love it.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for listening. We really appreciate it. But they were talking about something Florida Georgia Line, and then this guy said to me, one of the guys turned around and said, "Are you talking about Florida Georgia Line?" I was like, yeah. And he's like, "I hate those guys." And I was like, "Oh yeah, well, we hate those guys too." And then he was like, "No, you don't understand. I went to school with them. Like I know what they're like."
Yeah. And
I hate them. Yeah, they're like everything that you said about what you thought they were probably like. Apparently, that's what they are.
Well, would you say they were like just rich kids essentially?
Yeah, just rich kids, country club kids, or whatever.
They grew their hair out long and got some pearl snap shirts. And
exactly. So pretend like they're suddenly down with the the country boys or whatever. But that's not. They're more country club than country and western. We'll put it like that. So.
So they were from are they from Texas or they're from Florida Georgia Line?
Yeah, my friend at work is from Florida. So,
okay.
That's what he said. So definitely felt good to have at least I didn't feel like we were like taking cheap shots at them. It's like they deserved it.
No, even if we were, I will gladly take that cheap shot any day.
It is at least it's not as big of a cheap shot as having to listen to their music.
Hey! Well, I mean, we even talked about Shania Twain and how she actually has a lot of redeeming qualities.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not being total genre snobs or anything.
Yeah, so take the good with the bad. But,
you got it.
But yeah, so 1985 is the year that we are going to do.
Talking about 1985.
The 80s.
The 80s.
The 80s.
Let's start with the 80s. When we first get to these decades, we want to talk a little bit about the 80s. The 80s is kind of a special, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but it's kind of a special decade to me because that's my childhood.
Sure, me too.
I was born in 78, but I remember the 70s, so the 80s are, that's me being a kid. That's all the fun memories that I remember of, that was the home base, what culture was like in the 80s is what I grew up thinking the world was like.
Yeah.
And which is terrifying in retrospect.
Kind of, yeah.
Big hair, day glow colors, tiny shorts, boxy cars. That was the world. That was, what the world was supposed to be like. And so, and I said in the 1990 episode, and I do believe this, that the 90s were a reaction against the 80s. And in any philosophical debate about the 80s versus the 90s, I'm going to side with the 90s pretty much every time.
Right.
But I feel like I ran the 80s down pretty hard in 1990. And one thing that I want to make sure I say is that I actually do love a lot about the 80s. And the 80s are a lot of fun, if nothing else.
The 80s have a lot of redeeming qualities that I don't think a lot of people touch on. And it's apparent now because there's so much nostalgia from the 80s that is really being retooled. I mean, I feel like a lot of companies are kind of repackaging our childhood and reselling it to
they're absolutely doing it. They've been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah.
That's part of what I hate about the 80s, like the Ready Player One stuff.
True. Really? You don't like that?
No, I don't really like that stuff at all. But my feelings about Ernest Cline, the guy who wrote that book, are really complicated. And we'll keep it on topic.
This gives you an idea of my relationship with the 80s. There's a documentary on Netflix about the time they buried all those Atari cartridges.
Yeah, that's where I saw him too.
Yeah. I mean, he's sitting there and he's like, the 80s was like the height of culture, man. And here I am sitting in my Back to the Future DeLorean. And I'm just telling you about how great the 80s are. And I just wanted to be like, get out of here, man. That's so conservative. That's so backwards. That's so regressive.
Yeah.
And the one thing about the 80s is that the 80s wanted to be the 50s so bad they couldn't see straight. Do you remember seeing every movie, if they were in a diner, if they had to eat somewhere, they didn't eat in McDonald's. They ate in a diner.
Yeah.
There was even Back to the Future, which is in a 1985 movie, which, by the way, before we get any farther.
There was a movie called Diner that came out in the 80s.
And a pinball game based on it that was also in very 50s
They had
and
a
80s
diner
conversion.
pinball game?
Yeah, they did.
Seriously?
Man. Yeah, and it's a good one. Yeah.
It's great. It's classic.
Yeah, it's a classic. It is. But yeah, I mean, like, so the 80s were, in fact, that was something they said about The Simpsons, is The Simpsons was one of the first shows. And even though it came out in 89, you know, and Tracy Ullman a little bit before that, that's really like a high watermark 90s, like cultural signifier, right? And one of the things that was radical about it was that it actually treated, you know, the contemporary world the way it actually was.
Right.
And not like through this filter of like baby boomer 50s nostalgia, which a lot of the 80s really was.
Right.
Certainly politically it was.
Sure, yeah.
You know, but even like culturally it was. And I feel like the 80s have become that for our generation.
Yeah.
There's so many guys that I'll talk to, and you know, I love reminiscing about, you know, being a kid and everything. And in many ways, the 80s were the happiest decade of my life. Just a kid running around doing my thing, happy childhood,
Me
you know.
too.
But I don't really want to spend my adulthood thinking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend it thinking about Transformers.
Yeah.
And I end up in these conversations where people are talking about all that old stuff like it's still relevant. And that frustrates me. And that's where I get frustrated with things like Ready Player One, because it seems like such a sop to that sort of childhood nostalgia that I think at a certain point it goes beyond. Do you know the Mike Watt song Against the 70s?
Yeah, the kids.
The kids of
Eddie
the day
Vedder
should
sings
protect
it,
themselves against the 70s. It's not reality. It's someone else's sentimentality. I feel shaped by that. But about the 80s more than the 70s.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, you know, Dazed and Confused, right? The red-haired woman who's in that movie, she's I think she's like Francis Ford Coppola's daughter, maybe, or no?
Is it?
No, I could have that wrong. Sofia Coppola's his daughter, and she's also a filmmaker, but she's her father, I feel like, is someone who is important. I can't remember who, and she also dated and/or was married to Beck for quite a while, and when they broke up, that made Beck make the Sea Change album. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the quote that she has in that movie were like, the 60s, oh my God, the 60s were amazing. The 70s, oh my God, they obviously suck. And then so that just must mean the 80s will be amazing, you know?
Right.
There was the Rewatchables podcast. Their last episode was Dazed and Confused, and it was a really good one. And I remember they brought that up and kind of talked about its cultural cachet, that statement. Bill Simmons refers to Parker Posey's character as Hannibal Lecter, because they were talking about how she was doing the freshman hazing when she was like, all right, air raid bitches. And he was like, she's terrifying in that scene. Like, it makes my skin crawl seeing her yell like that, which is kind of awesome. True. Yeah. That's a really good podcast if you don't listen to it. But yeah. So I think that it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people feel like, you know, different decades have to be a reaction on other decades, and they pretty much are. But I've never really thought about Ready Player One in that context that you have. I have a good friend that's really like head over heels into 80s nostalgia. That is like his thing, like video games.
I have one too.
Yeah, my friend Mark, and he in fact commented when I posted about it, and he was like, if you ever want someone to come and talk about the 80s, I'm your guy. Yeah. So,
I mean, I know it's like, you know, I have a lot of interest in like the 60s and a lot of, but I like to think that I'm not stuck in one decade. Right. And the other thing is the 60s is not my era, so it's not like an era that I am, you know, overly nostalgic about, or like rose-colored glasses or anything. I mean, there's a lot of like, you know, the AIDS in the 80s. I mean, there was like so much stuff going on that was like, and even like the sort of cocaine out of control culture and stuff.
Crazy crack war. Like,
I mean, the crime waves and stuff where it was really like, there was a lot about that time period that's really bad. And yet it's sort of all covered up in this sort of glossy sheen. And that's
Flock of Seagulls.
Exactly. Exactly. Or MTV, you know,
like you know,
Cyndi Lauper or something.
Yeah,
you know?
There was nothing about the AIDS epidemic in The Wedding Singer. You know, like
right. But you know, the flip side is that the 80s are very easy to parody and very easy to like talk about. And the things that are fun about the 80s are just inarguably fun. 1985 gives us, you know, Back to the Future. That's an inarguably fun movie, right? You know, like there's a lot of stuff that in the 80s people people didn't have a sense of irony really in
Yeah.
the 80s. You know,
Well,
like look at something like Rocky IV. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
go and like in the Cold War by punching a guy.
Seriously, yeah. By beating Ivan Drago, everything's going to be fine. You know?
Exactly. And it's not like funny. Like now, if we did
Yeah,
it would be hilarious.
exactly.
You know? But like then people, and I think that's the cocaine talking more than anything else. But I think that there were a lot of people who like, you know, that sort of lack of irony, like they missed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
I guess I
think,
don't.
I think the 80s were the first decade for us. So when we got to the 90s and we like probably the mid to late 90s, like I just brought up The Wedding Singer, right? And I think that was the first decade where we looked back on it and we were like, oh my God, people looked real, like the fashion and all that stuff was really this kind of strange thing, and like the flock of seagulls hair, and like I can't believe people dressed like that. And
I don't know, man, because in the 80s, and we'll get to the 70s at some point,
Yeah.
because my opinion of the 70s are very much shaped by being a kid in the 80s.
Yeah.
And the idea of an afro or a bell bottom
Yeah.
or something like that, or even a disco ball.
Yeah.
Like the idea of disco was so like just
yeah,
anathema.
Saturday Night Fever, and
Exactly,
all that
like
stuff.
leisure
Yeah.
suits and everything.
Yeah.
You know, the late 80s gives you the great Leisure Suit Larry video game, right? And it's
Oh my
like
God,
the
I forgot
idea
about that.
Leisure Suit Larry, like the idea of a leisure suit was immediately someone who was creepy and gross and
Yeah.
like stuck in the 70s,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, like the gold chain, like the button-down
Yeah,
shirt with all
exactly, like the
gold
medallions,
chains.
yeah.
What was the Wild and Crazy Guys SNL skit?
Yeah.
Steve Martin.
We are too wild and crazy.
Yeah, like you know, where these weird European guys that are trying to like feel American boobs. Like that was literally the whole like kind of impetus for that sketch. Like, oh my God, we want to see American girls. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
So the 70s did have a backlash in the 80s, and then the 80s had a huge backlash in the
Yeah.
90s. I think the 2000s we were too busy fighting terrorists or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
to think of. I mean, unless I'm just stuck in the 90s or something. But there are people. Obviously, we moved on culturally very much.
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
don't know that the 90s were subjected to the same kind of cultural backlash. Do you think? Were there people in, you know? I mean, it seemed like there were still kids in Green Day shirts in 2005 or something. Well, I guess Green Day was
I
still,
will say that in the early 2000s up to probably 2007, 2008, a lot of that stuff in the 90s held true. You know,
Yeah.
Oasis and Oasis, Green Day, Pearl Jam, you know, Breeders even. Like, I think it was probably when like all that stuff started to fall off was when like EDM started to really take precedence over popular music. And then,
Yeah.
you know, and it's kind of like you said about Kid A, how, you know, one week all of your friends were making, you know, grunge albums, and then the next week they were all making Chemical Brothers albums, you
Right,
know, and
right.
like Crystal Method, like they were influenced by that kind of stuff, Aphex Twin instead of, you know,
Yeah.
Soundgarden. So.
Yeah, and I totally felt left holding the bag.
Yeah.
Although I do like a lot of that stuff.
do I.
always
It's-
sound
it's
like
good
I'm
music.
crankier about
Yeah.
EDM than I really am. But,
Yeah.
But like from a standpoint of being a musician, I never once wanted to make music like that.
Right,
You know, and that's
right.
kind of that was
Yeah.
the difference. You know.
Sure,
But-
sure.
Yeah, I think that's true. So let's kick it back to 1985 then
Yeah,
specifically.
specific.
So 85 is kind of a fun year. You know,
is,
actually
it is.
we've been really cranky about the Billboard charts, but I was looking at them a little bit ago, and there's some garbage on here, but most of it
It's
is
not
pretty
bad.
fun.
Yeah,
even
I
the stuff
agree.
that's bad, it's not that bad.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? I mean, We Built This City is on here, so that's really bad.
Starship.
Yeah, but you know, like
What is like that was like Jefferson Airplane, right?
yeah, Jefferson Airplane then became Jefferson Starship, and then became
just
Starship.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Grace Slick, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's an overrated band.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I mean, even Jefferson Airplane.
Really? I like Jefferson Airplane.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounded
I mean-
I do like White Rabbit. You know,
Yeah.
it's all right. And Somebody to Love is a fine pop song. It's all
Yeah,
right. But
right.
like as far as bands with a huge legacy. If you told me this band is one day going to sound like Starship, I'd be like, yeah, I can probably believe it. You
Really?
know?
Yeah, that's
they
fair.
don't
That's
really
fair.
sound like they're in it for for some bigger, higher purpose or anything.
Yeah, we're gonna make We Built This City one day.
Yeah,
that is probably when we get to. Well, we'll get to it, but yeah, that's not a good song.
No, that's not a good song. What else is on the charts that you
Dude,
feel?
so Crazy for You by Madonna That is a great song. Do you know that?
Yeah, I know it. I'm crazy.
I'm crazy for
you.
it's great ballad.
It's one of her best. Yeah,
I agree.
I think it's good.
I agree. It was very much Madonna's prime too. I think.
Yeah, Like a Virgin is on here, and I think that's
yeah.
a good song.
Agreed. Very controversial too. Remember
Of course.
She like basically gets the Jesus comes off the cross or something.
Oh
in
no,
that
that's
thing.
like a prayer.
Oh,
That's a different. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that one was super controversial.
Sorry.
And that's an okay song too.
Yeah.
Although it's, I understand why it was controversial.
Me too.
You know, like that's an example of Madonna just courting controversy, which she was really good at. You know.
Yeah.
But the problem with Madonna, I think, is like her songs don't really have much of a shelf life typically.
True.
Like a lot of her stuff, it's like, oh, that's really cool. And then 2 years later, you're like, what? Why were we listening to this? Used to be my playground. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
like, oh, but at the time, it seemed like it was a really great song, you know?
Yeah.
But I do think that a couple of her songs on here are some of her best, you know? So.
Agreed.
Power Love is on here. I know I just mentioned our friends
Lewis?
Huey Lewis in the news. I mentioned the Back to the Future, Back to the Future soundtrack.
Huey Lewis has an interesting kind of arc for me personally, because there was a time like, Back to the Future, Huey Lewis was great. And then as I got older, I thought Huey Lewis was kind of like dumb old people music until
Right.
I was like probably in my mid 20s. And then I listened to Sports again, and I said, "Man, this is actually a really great album. This has really strong songs on it."
Yeah, it is.
Like say what you will about Huey Lewis, but it's they're good songs, man.
They are,
like,
yeah, and they're pretty well produced. They're not
well-produced.
embarrassing. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like those are better produced. I mean, I love The Boss, but like Born on the USA production next to Sports, I think
Yeah.
I'd go with Sports.
Me
It's from
too.
a production standpoint, not necessarily from a song
and they're
standpoint.
indulgent, but they're not over the top.
Right.
They're perfectly.
They're tight. They're
They're very tight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, great stuff. Let's see what else we got here.
Yeah, I think Time's been pretty kind to Huey Lewis in the news
Agreed.
because they're one of those bands where bands like that just stopped. Like you don't have bands like that anymore. And so what happens is
true.
you go back and you listen to them, you're like, oh, that kind of sounds special now.
Yeah,
Instead of
yeah.
it sounding like, every white guy wannabe soul band that used to
Right,
exist
right.
back in those days. Like Huey Lewis was probably the best of those bands. And
Yeah, probably.
and did you know that those the News were actually used to be called the Clovers? They actually
Really?
played they're
His
the
band.
backing band on the first Elvis Costello album.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So you
wow.
would never have
I
thought.
never would have thought that.
No,
yeah.
no, but that's them playing background on Allison and everything. So
That's awesome.
that is awesome. So they got a good
So
pedigree
awesome.
there too.
Yeah.
So,
For sure. I mean, and
so
you
come
can-
back, Huey Lewis. All is forgiven.
Oh, he still tours and stuff.
No, I know, but I'm saying
Okay.
like we've changed our minds about him. I remember
yeah.
reading a Wizard magazine once.
Oh, Wizard comic
God,
magazine.
the comic magazine.
Oh, yeah,
But back
I've
in the
been there.
'90s, I would read them, and they had something about like Batman, and it was they had like a sarcastic '90s tone in the thing, and it was like. What do we really wish to see Batman crossover be? Is like Batman crossover with Huey Lewis in the News, and Batman beats up Huey Lewis, and then they were like, and maybe he could get rid of that no killing rule when he's beating on Huey. And it was like the way the joke was going, it was
Yeah.
like Huey Lewis is so demonstrably terrible that
Right.
Batman should kill him.
Yeah,
Ha, that's the joke. But it's funny because at the time I thought that was hilarious. And some of it is just like that sense of humor doesn't really rock my boat anymore. But the other thing is just that Huey Lewis is fine. Like, why would you target him?
Do you think that, when we talked about 1990 and how, bands, had all this autonomy over their work and there was a much more serious tone, do you think that had something to do with it? Like, here's Huey Lewis in the News and they're this fun pop rock band. And,
Yeah, probably.
now everything's serious and like everything is Pearl Jam Jeremy and like what the, kind
That's
of like you were
probably
saying,
true.
like fun? You want to have fun on a record? Like,
Yeah.
screw that, man. The
Yeah.
world is a dark, dangerous place. you
Right,
know?
right. We gotta
so
talk about-
maybe
yeah.
there was some of that.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
That I and that when I say I side with the 90s over the 80s, I do like music to be made with a purpose. And sometimes if the purpose is just to have a good time, that's okay.
Right.
As long as the level of quality is good enough,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's a Smokey Robinson thing, right? Like
Yeah.
Smokey Robinson can write a song like My Girl. It doesn't have to be about coming to grips with his deep inner feelings. It's
Exactly.
a beautiful pop song,
Exactly.
right? And that's completely valid and should always be valid. But I think there was a time in the mid 90s in particular, and these guys, we're talking about like Wizard magazine, like the
Yeah.
comic book readers were probably the worst of it,
Oh,
as far as
God.
like the anti-hero and like I must be darkety dark to be have any validity whatsoever. You know what I mean? And so something like Huey Lewis, if you spend all your time reading Venom comics,
Right.
Huey Lewis is going to
It's not
look
gonna
like some
it's gonna-
BS
yeah.
to you. You know.
Well, and it's like, what is the Batman graphic novel, The Long Halloween? Are you familiar with that?
I know it's Jeff Loeb, isn't it?
Yeah, and
I haven't
it's-
read it, but I'm aware of it.
That's what they based the Christopher Nolan Batman movies on.
Oh, is that right?
Graphic novel. Yeah,
Oh,
I think that
fantastic.
might have come out around then. And of course, as we know from those movies, is very dark and very brooding,
Very
and
serious and-
serious. Yeah.
There's a backlash against that kind of thing now, and I think well overdue for sure.
Right.
But I think probably there was a period where,
Yeah.
and I think the '80s probably suffered a little bit from that. You know what I mean? Like looking down this list again, there's stuff like, Susu Studio by Phil Collins or whatever,
right.
Or I mean, you scroll through this list and there's just tons of stuff that's just silly.
So,
We Don't Need Another Hero by Tina Turner, which is an okay song, but we don't need another hero. In parentheses, Thunderdome.
There probably is some kind of id we can draw to this song, but
Yeah.
Sugar Walls by Sheena
Oh
Easton.
my gosh,
Holy shit.
Sugar Walls. I was thinking about what's the
man.
worst song on this list, and
Yeah.
that's up there,
That's up
man. Yeah, what a metaphor. My Sugar Walls. Holy cow!
And it's almost like, you see Sugar Walls and you know exactly what she's talking about right away.
And then have you seen the video for that?
Probably, I don't remember.
It just
but-
reemphasizes it.
Yeah.
California Girls by David Lee Roth. That is a silly song.
Oh, God.
Silly song.
I feel like anything David Lee Roth did outside of Van Halen should be stricken from existence. And
Except here's the
California
thing:
Girls
the
is
Just a
included.
Gigolo video, though, that should stay
Yeah, okay.
as a reminder of what not to do.
fair, yeah.
because that video is hilarious,
shown
but
in,
in
like,
a cringy
music
way.
school.
Yeah, like. Don't do this. Don't let your lead singer do that. It should be just a warning against going solo for
Yeah,
lead singers. It
for
should just
sure,
be like,
yeah.
you think you're going to have a career after you, back out of the Decemberists? Hey, man, check this out. This is what
Colin
happens.
Malloy, beware. So I was just scrolling through the list, and there's 2 Julian Lennon songs on here. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, I couldn't sing them for you. I've heard
Right.
them both multiple times. I never got in. I'm sorry to say, I don't think the Julian Lennon songs are that great. I think Too Late for Goodbyes is slightly better. And look,
Okay.
it's at 77 and Velotte is at 78.
78.
So, I like Julian a lot. I think
Yeah.
he's a cool guy and everything.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad he had a little bit of success, and certainly within the confines of his, certainly with all the stuff that he went through with the
Right.
death of his dad and the distance of his dad and all that
Sure.
stuff. You got nothing but respect for him. His
Yeah.
behind the music is actually a pretty good one too.
Really? I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Well, and his other son, Sean, was like really into metal for a while. And then he like played bass for like Siba Mata, that Japanese band and stuff. And
He has his own stuff that's
Yeah.
okay. He's got a weird
Yeah.
cover of God Only Knows and stuff.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah, yeah.
that's interesting.
I remember one of the first things I ever heard from him was a song called "It's All Right," which is it was just like a music video. He's like 4 years old and he did it.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And it's just like him saying, "It's all right, it's all
Yeah.
right, it's all right." And when I was a kid, I saw it and I just wanted to. I hate that kid. I hate that kid because
kid.
he's like 6 months younger than me. And he's
Yeah.
got a music video. He must die.
Even though he's John Lennon's son.
Right. Well, I didn't understand any of the context around that.
Oh, really?
And my
Okay,
dad and I
'cause
watched
you
it, and
were-
even to this day,
Because you were that age. Too,
I was
right?
that age, and so it started that's the beginning of my jealousy of anybody my age or younger being famous.
Yeah.
but some of his stuff is pretty good.
Yeah,
So.
that's cool. Bruce Springsteen, I'm on fire.
Great song, actually.
It's a great song.
Yeah. I mean, I think he wrote that for Roy Orbison, and I
did he
think
really?
Orbison should have done it. This
I
is a
can-
few years before Roy Orbison's back on the charts with the Traveling Wilburys, right? But
Yeah.
But that song, I would have loved to have heard Roy's version. I bet he may have a version, actually, now that I think about it.
Really? Maybe.
We should look for it.
So the Mary Jane Girls have a song on this list, In My House. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that song, but
I'm
they
not
have
either.
they have a song called All Night Long that was sampled in a lot of hip hop songs. It's like a boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, boom, ba-doom, boom, boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, boom. And it's like all all night. It's a great song. I'm gonna give it to you, give it to you, give it. It's a really great song. That's not the song, but
Yeah.
every time I see the Mary Jane Girls, for some reason, I just like they just really have a neat groove about them. I have one of their full length albums on vinyl, and I listen to it all the time. Actually,
Yeah,
it's great.
I got to check that out for sure.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Smooth Operator's on here. Sade. That might be my favorite song from this
It's
list.
a very strong song for sure.
Although Raspberry Beret's on here, so
Yeah.
I think I might.
You know, that's one of my least favorite Prince
Really?
songs. Yeah,
I
don't
like
know
it. Goes
why.
back to liking songs that are kind of a short story or whatever,
Yeah.
where he talks about
Yeah, that's
the
fair.
guy getting onto him when he's like. I love
Yeah.
that it's sort of Prince talking almost in a because he's from the Midwest and almost like a Midwestern thing where
That's
it's like
true.
she comes in the grocery store and she's bigger than he is and all this
Yeah,
stuff and
yeah.
it's like it puts you in a place and I love that and I love the melody and I love the Around
Yeah.
the World in a Day is a great album too. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of his
Yeah.
sort of psychedelic pop album.
That's
I think it's
fair.
great.
That's fair. Okay. And I don't dislike that song. I just
Yeah,
I
right,
don't
right.
know if it's as far as Prince songs go. I don't know if it's my favorite, but
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
good one.
All Through the Night by Cyndi Lauper. That's a great Cyndi Lauper song.
That is a good Cyndi Lauper song. What else we got here? There's a couple of Tears for Fears songs on here, and probably Head Over Heels. Probably my favorite Tears for Fears song is on here. I think Everybody Wants to Rule the World is on here too.
Yeah, and that's probably my favorite Tears for Fears song. But I love both of them. You know,
Yeah. What about your boy Don Henley and the Boys of Summer, bro?
I hate that song. There was the Ataris did a cover of it.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, the
I
guy,
know.
the drummer in my band, Dolph, liked that song.
They're
And
from,
was
I
like,
think,
oh,
the
come on,
Ataris
man.
are from like Rising Sun, Indiana, which is about 45 minutes away from Cincinnati. So they used to always play over here and over in not over here, but over in Cincy. And I remember buying that album, So Long Astoria, and selling it back to Everybody's Records because it was so bad. Because I remember like The End Is Forever, and they had a couple of other albums that were actually really strong, like pop punk albums. And then that album, they just went in a really
didn't do it.
Really. Well, they went in like almost like overproduced like pop rock direction, and
Yeah.
it was just not good. So
Yeah, I just that goes back to the if you're gonna do a cover of a punk rock cover of a Don Henley song, that better be an ironic cover,
Right,
Because if it's
yeah.
not an ironic cover,
better be
what
like-
are you doing?
It better be like a Me First in the Gimme Gimme.
yeah, it better
song
be
or
a
something.
They did
Yeah.
a great version of Mandy, which I love.
So do I.
Oh, you came and you gave without taking.
Dude, their cover of "End of the Road" by Boyz II Men. It's so good.
I mean, the
They had-
ironic punk cover is such a
It's great.
such
Yeah,
a it's so
it's
dumb,
fantastic.
but if you're gonna do I can't imagine saying, "Hey guys, we're in a pop punk band, man.
Let's
What's-
do Don.
Let's
Hen-
do
what's
Don
more
Hen-
punk
that
than
Boys
Don
of
Henley?
Summer.
Yeah,
Let's do
Well,
that.
and it's like they were about 3 or 4 years too early to be Fall Out Boy.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's kind of what happened. It's like that was if the Ataris came out like if that album came out in like 2010 as opposed to 2004, then they would have probably been
they'd
huge.
still be
But
around, yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
We'd
so,
still be having to talk about them. Sorry, Ataris.
yeah, they're good dudes. I didn't meet their lead singer. He was friends with some friends of mine, and he's actually a pretty decent guy. So
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know anything about him other
Yeah.
than that cover. It's just going back to since it's 85. I just don't like that song.
No,
like
I
I
don't
don't.
either.
It's
Yeah.
and that is something that by 85 we're starting to contend with from a rock standpoint. Is that
Yeah.
rock's been around for 20 years, and that song is kind of about that. Not 20 years, like almost 30 years at that
Right,
point, right?
right.
So you have people who grew up, baby boomers who grew up, and they're now in their 30s or in their mid 30s, and they're looking back at the Grateful Dead and all that, and they're now 80s. Corporate executives and all this kind of stuff. And hey, we've given up on all that. We're forget peace and love, cocaine and voting for Ronald Reagan. Is now what we're all into now.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's an example of a song. I guess we talk sometimes about how like this mumblecore this whatever SoundCloud rap's not written for us.
Yeah.
Something like the Boys of Summer feels like it's not written for us either. It's
No,
like if you
of
get
course
in,
not.
fine. If my dad gets in touch with his feelings on that song, that's his business. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to listen to it.
So I remember when I was younger, and we went over to one of my dad's coworkers. who was probably a little bit younger than him, and him and his wife were just like first starting to have kids, and they had little kids, and I was probably like 9 or 10, and my sister was probably like 13 or 14 or 15, and I remember we went over to their house, and he had like all these like CDs and stuff, and I remember the one CD he had was the end of Innocence, Don Henley, and I remember thinking, oh my god, I remember like it kind of framed the whole like kind of baby boomer yuppie kind of thing, and I kind of somehow understood that even then when I saw it. It was weird, like when I found out about it, like all kind of came together and made sense.
Yeah,
you know?
like that to me, that is like an ultimate kind of yuppie. Like Boys of Summer is the ultimate yuppie song.
Oh, totally,
basically.
totally.
Like I don't know that there's a better one.
No, probably not.
So.
And nothing against my dad's friend because they were very
nice
people,
not against. There are a lot of really friendly yuppies. I grew up around them, but it's just not. That's not something I aspire to be, or I want to be like the '90s version of that guy.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
There's got to be a song like that though for us, where it's like, oh, guys our age, it's like this kind of sad rock song or something, where it's like, I wonder what that is.
Yeah, there is something like that, but I can't put my finger on it quite. What it
probably
would be.
Bowling for Soup's 1985. That's probably what it was. God, I hate that song.
When I Google searched I just put in 1985 into Google, and that's the first thing that came up. Bowling for Soup.
And they're from Texas, too.
They're from Denton.
Yeah, when they first kind of hit the scene, people were talking about them all the time. And I was
like,
just,
oh, man, this
Bowling for Soup, man. You got to listen
quite
to
possibly the worst band name I've ever heard.
Yeah,
well,
Hoobastank is pretty high on the list of bad. At least Bowling
Did you ever hear what the lead singer said Hoobastank meant?
Don't care.
Well, no, it's so bad.
What is it? What is it?
Because I don't even know. I feel ashamed that I actually know this, but he said the H, Hoobastank is the H in Jesus H. Christ. Yeah. The look on your face just says it all right now.
It still doesn't explain.
Anyone listening out there, if you could have seen the look on Chris's face when I said that, you would.
It was just a 1,000-yard stare. Like, dear God,
yes, it was. That's literally what he said. Yeah.
Somehow he just made it worse.
Yeah.
Like, if they named the band Jesus Hoobastank Christ, then there's a part of me that's like, all right, well, it's like Butthole Surfers or something, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sure.
But if they're just like, oh, it still doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain how they ended up with Hoobastank, you know?
Not at all.
Oh, good grief.
It's bad.
By the way, so I did a thing that and I promise not to do this every single time, but since it's the 80s.
We have a themed beverage again today, don't we?
We do have a themed beverage again today. Do you want to tell the folks what we're drinking?
So we are drinking Tab.
Tab
Cola.
Tab Cola,
which
right
somehow
here.
still exists. And I actually knew that. I see it in H-E-B all the time. For those of you outside of Texas, H-E-B is the grocery store that we have here in Texas that is actually really great. But they still sell Tab, as I'm sure everybody else does. And Chris managed to, what did you get, like a 12-pack?
I got a 12-pack of it. I'm stuck with it now. It does not taste that great, man.
It's bad. You can taste the NutraSweet aspartame in it.
It tastes like Coke that has NutraSweet crammed in it, basically.
Much.
So
it's like Diet Coke without the nice crispness of Diet Coke.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I like Tab better than Diet Coke, though, to be honest with you.
I used to like Diet Coke a lot. I don't drink it. I don't drink soda that much anymore.
I don't either.
Topo Chico, but
and before anybody says anything, Tab technically showed up in like the 60s or something. But I think of Tab as very much a kind of quintessential 80s drink because it shows up in Back to the Future. It's what he wants to drink in Back to the Future. Yeah. So it seems to me, and then that was about the time it started to disappear too. Yeah. So then you couldn't get it after that. So it was a reminder. If I could have done Crystal Pepsi or something, or
Crystal Pepsi's 90s.
Oh, I guess it is 90s, isn't it? What would be like a Ecto Cooler? I guess maybe would be an 80s thing.
Probably.
But I couldn't really find anything like that. So Tabs are poison today.
Tabs are go-to. Yeah, and I had to take Courtney to the airport very early this morning, and I came in with a big venti Starbucks iced coffee, so I was polishing that off, and you probably heard about 10 minutes ago me open my can of Tab.
Yeah.
I just kind of delved into that chasm, so here we are.
Here we are. And I still didn't bring you any other alternatives. So if you're thirsty, guess what? You're drinking that Tab. So I pick Raspberry Beret as my favorite song, and I'm going to say one of us has to go after Sugar Walls, and I think the other has to go after We Built This City, unless you've got another one on here.
We Built This City is my least favorite song.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay,
if
then-
unless you want it to be your least favorite, that's fine.
I'll go Sugar Walls. I'll go after Sugar Walls.
You know what? There's a song, Chicago, You're the Inspiration is on
yeah.
this list, and I fucking hate that song.
Yeah, I hate that
As
song,
much
too.
as Chicago has redeeming qualities, God, there's something about that song that just pisses me off. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a very terrible song.
It's
Do you want to
not good.
say that's the worst one, and then I'll
Yeah, yeah.
we'll give Sheena Easton a little bit of a break.
Yeah, we can. Sheena Easton can have a stay of execution here.
Okay, we built the city for me.
You're my inspiration.
You're my inspiration. We Are the World is on this list too.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Oh man, but that you can't call that a bad song because
No.
it just did too much good. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's
no song with Michael Jackson singing the hook is the worst song on the list.
absolutely not.
So
Couldn't agree more.
cool. What was your favorite?
Favorite song on this list? Tears for Fears. Head Over Heels.
That's a great song.
Absolutely.
Or head over feet.
Head Over Feet is like
Oh, is the
yeah, that's Alanis Morissette's song. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Head Over Heels is the Tears for Fears. Yeah, actually, in the Alanis Morissette, that song's a good song too.
Yeah, I
like
do
that song.
actually.
I don't know if anybody if she still tours or anything, but she's good.
Yeah, I like her a lot.
Yeah.
I married a woman who looks just like her, so it's
Yeah, I guess Steph does look like.
yeah. She used to be told that all the time.
Really?
Like, yeah, people back when Alanis was everywhere would be like, "You look like Alanis Morissette." In fact, she had a joke. Like she used to do these comedy she would be a great podcaster actually. She used to do comedy radio shows.
Oh, really?
And one of her sketches was like recurring bits was like, "How many times has someone told me I look like Alanis Morissette this week?"
That's
Two.
so funny.
It
What
would
were you
be
on?
like-
So do you remember You Can't Do That on Television?
Right, of course. Yeah.
She was in that, and it's funny too because I remember asking Courtney had never seen You Can't Do That on Television.
Oh,
and
really?
that was how I knew that our generations were different because she did not grow up with that show and I did, and that was a really brilliant show for its time. And I guess it's not really 80s, so it might
It
not
is.
be. Yeah, is it? Okay.
it
Yeah, I
is.
guess it is.
Yeah, it's definitely 80s.
Well, and
I mean,
like-
I think it may have started in the 70s,
Yeah.
but I saw it in 85, 86.
Yeah,
so
and it
would've
was
been
almost
around.
like a Saturday Night Live or something like
a
that.
Monty
for
Python
kids.
almost,
Yeah, for
you know.
kids. And that producer guy that always used to come in was basically, he played like almost all of the adult characters.
Right. I heard that.
He was
Whatever, yeah.
Barf. And Blip's Arcade. Yeah, Barf was so... For those of you that don't know, I just kind of explained what You Can't Do That on Television is. And there was one of the skits was they would all go to this really nasty burger restaurant called like Diner that had burgers called Barfs. And Barf was the chef and they would always talk shit about Barf and he would just go, "Oh, I heard that
I
from
heard
the
that."
kitchen."
Yeah.
And they would sometimes call him out and they would be like, "Hey, Barf," because they had those uber Canadian accents and they would say, "Barf." Oh my God. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, this is when you do start talking about the 80s and getting nostalgic. This is the kind of thing
This is
that
the kind of
happens. It's
stuff
like
that
fun.
happens. Yeah, you can't do that on television.
Yeah, that was another thing I mentioned that my parents didn't let me hear. Parents just don't understand. They had a thing against you can't do this on television.
you
Can't do that on
serious?
television too. We watched it quite a bit, but they did sort of say because that same guy would play like a dad, and then there was like the mom,
Yeah.
you know, and they were incompetent parents.
They
and
were,
stuff, and
for
so,
sure.
And
Yeah.
that was the joke. But so my parents always saw that as like parents are the target of these jokes. So
Yeah.
so they were just like, you can't listen to that.
Right.
It undermines parents.
Yeah.
Okay,
Man.
sure, sorry.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, as you know, whatever. Everyone's got to hang up. I mean, this parents against media was a big thing in 1985 too, because this is the year of Tipper Gore.
Oh,
and,
yeah, PMRC.
yeah,
PR,
exactly.
whatever
You know,
say
it's like
that.
going after musicians and stuff for.
It's really crazy that was a crusade that was because do you remember when like the Jello Biafra stuff popped off, Dead Kennedys and all that? And I
mean, I don't-
He was on Oprah.
No, I mean, obviously, I love the Dead Kennedys,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember any particular. I mean, because some of that was when I was a little kid that he was.
So
Around,
and I don't remember that from being that age either. Like I didn't watch it when it aired, but I remember when
right.
I really got into punk rock, and I remember hearing like all the Dead Kennedys were this important punk band, and Jello Biafra was this really important figure in the world of
Right.
punk rock. Let me learn some stuff about him. So I came across, I don't know where I came across so it was Jello Biafra and Tipper Gore were both on Oprah.
Oh my God.
In the 80s. And
That
it
sounds
was like,
amazing.
Oh, dude, it was a fucking train wreck of an interview. And it's funny too, because Jello kind of almost schools Tipper Gore a little bit, because she's like, she basically tries to explain away the censorship thing by saying she's liberal. She's like, I'm a liberal Democrat. That's what you have to understand. And I just care about the children. And Jello Biafra's like, look, people have threatened to kill me because of what I'm saying, and like me and like NWA, and it's like, we've been threatened by the government and by the police, and that's not right, and all this stuff, and you're basically perpetuating that. And basically her rebuttal was, I'm a liberal. was her rebuttal to that. And,
the thing about that's always struck me, and I don't want to get too much into politics on this podcast, but I do think that was kind of an attack from the right thing. I mean, like how sometimes there's that theory, like the Sister Soldier moment, where someone sort of like someone who's on the left makes an attack from the right to show that they're in the middle somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa, where the right will take something, maybe a popular attitude on the left, attack from the left, and then it makes them look more sensible, right? And it's a political move. And I always kind of wondered if that's what was going on there.
Probably.
It was like, oh, well, the liberals, we always have this reputation of being like free love in the 60s, and we're all, sort of reckless. And in the age of Reagan, that doesn't make sense anymore. So we've got to show that we care about the kids, and we don't want the kids listening to pornographic music.
We don't want them picking up an album cover that was designed by H.R. Giger.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, as a guy who's got two parents, two children,
you kind of
I understand a little bit of
that.
But I think at the point where you get to actual censorship, it's a joke,
exactly.
and that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So with that, I think we talked a lot about 1985.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with where it is.
Me too.
You ready to talk about our albums?
I am, yeah. So I got a little bit ambitious on this episode. The album I picked from 1985 was again a very interesting album. Different, it tried to kind of go against a lot of the norms of that decade and what was being made and what popular culture was. And how about we hear a little bit of it, Chris? What do you think?
Please do.
All right, let's do it. So we know those drums right away, right?
We absolutely know them. Beautiful record.
Beautiful record.
Great choice.
The record that is being played right now is Psycho Candy by a band called the Jesus and Mary Chain from Scotland. And this song is called Just Like Honey, which very much borrows from the Ronettes' Be My Baby.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic record. And we're going to talk a lot about the influence of girl groups on this, just because that's a subject close to my heart for sure.
Yeah.
But this kind of beat hadn't really been in music in a while.
No, it hadn't.
But then obviously the other big thing about it is the sound of the guitars on that
very
record.
Fuzzy, and that was kind of something that had not been done that much either. And I want to say that it was something that the members of the band were very much opposed to a lot of the music that was being made at the time, and this was their kind of line in the sand that they wanted to draw. And I want to say that, I think the fuzzy guitars were definitely part of that, and they were definitely something that was set to make a statement. Because they kind of it sounds deliberate, but not in a bad way. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, my whole beat on Psycho Candy is it's like an indie rock extremist album. You know what I mean? Like, especially from a production standpoint.
Sure,
that it's like the sound of the guitars, and I mean, it is just awash with buzzy, trebly guitars throughout.
Yeah,
and I'll get into my thoughts on that in a bit. But I mean, it shows the value of one big bold choice,
right?
And that's throughout the album to wash everything in this just heavy, distorted, and again trebly, not like distortion, like a it's not like a Metallica distortion or something.
Right. It's not like a psychedelic. Well, it kind of is
a little bit. There's some moments where they sound a little bit like '60s garage rock, but that stuff hadn't been cool in a long time, right?
Yeah, like nobody was listening to the Zombies then.
Or like the Count Five. Like there are a couple of tracks on here that sound like Psychotic Reactions type stuff, like Nuggets era stuff, and it's like but taken to an extreme, even, you know.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's really cool about
That
it.
made me, sorry to kind of go off topic here, but that made me think of the band Question Mark and the Mysterions.
Oh my God, I saw them.
Did you really?
I saw them when I was at one of the first concerts I ever went to in 1990.
Oh my God.
Yeah, dude came out in like a silver shimmery body sock,
Holy
and he's playing
shit.
96 Tears. Yeah, and like dancing
So,
around the stage and stuff. And
my
we were
dad-
I was like 12. I was like, what am I seeing? You know,
My dad loves that band.
they're great.
He's a big fan, and it's funny too because when that song 96 Tears used to come on the radio at the oldie station, my dad would be like, "Yeah, Question Mark and the Mysterions," and my mom would be like, "This is terrible." Like, she hated it so much.
I mean,
but
it's
my
so-
dad loved it, and I was like, "This is rad." Like, I dig
It's
it. you know?
great. Yeah. But it's like that garage rock stuff, but it's not
Yeah.
like this is a 80s version of a garage rock revival or anything. It's
Right,
just like
right.
there's a certain kind of like attitude and certainly approach to recording the guitars, but
So yes, and I was just kind of reading up a little bit. I'm sorry to interrupt
for it,
you
bro.
there, but this I found kind of interesting. Some of the influences that we're working with here, of course, the Shangri-Las and
yeah,
the
they say
Ronettes.
outright that they wanted to record a Shangri-La's
Yeah,
album, and
yeah.
they kind of did.
Kind of did, yeah. But they also were influenced by. I never know how to say this band's name right, so I'm probably going to butcher it. But Einstürzend Neubauten,
Yeah.
the industrial
Einstürzend, yeah.
German band that still is quite popular among a lot of the music, the kind of the people
Industrial
that are,
music
yeah,
and stuff for sure. The thing I know about Neubauten that always made me laugh is like I think it's the drummer from them, or it's one of the players from them. Like they're like his side project is playing in Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So it's like when he wants to blow off steam from being in Neubauten, he plays in the
plays
Bad
with
Seeds
Nick Cave.
which is like not in any way like it's not like he's going off and doing something relaxing. You know,
That's
it's
so
like.
crazy. Yeah, like I'm gonna maybe just put it down to like 9.
Yeah, exactly. Like instead of
That's
being
good
an
enough
11,
for me.
I'll turn
Yeah,
it down to
sorry.
9 and just kind of take a break.
Seriously, man. That is crazy.
Yeah. But they were influenced by that for sure. They'd been listening to that.
Yeah.
And they kind of wanted to mix the noise from like industrial and Neubauten kind of music with the Shangri-Las, basically.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And I really think it's the synthesis of those two things turned out in this final product the way it did, because I feel like if another band would try to do that, it's not going to end up,
Right.
and it's going to just not sound like it's going to just not really hit the mark, but they hit it straight on.
I think they had to love those things a lot. You know what I mean? I think it had to be. It had to come from a genuine place of love, and I think you can tell that on the songs. Like just
absolutely.
like Honey, that Ronette's beat is not just like let's just go borrow it. It's like the songs are written around that vibe, and so they understand both that, and also I think a lot lot of the sounds are like. Velvet Underground type things too.
Oh, absolutely.
Which
Yeah,
at that time, Velvet Underground
Nico,
was not like they had kind of disappeared. Like the Velvet Underground wasn't super well. Like they were starting to get their reputation back in the 80s.
The cultural cachet for Velvet Underground really didn't peak until the 90s.
I would
maybe
say
even
that's true.
2000s. I don't think, because
Now you'll see like greatest album of all time, Velvet Underground, Nico, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah.
Like I love that album, but that's the greatest album of all time now. Like that's a huge like the cultural cachet.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, like I've heard that it's REM that actually resurrected.
Oh, really? I can see that.
The Velvet Underground because they
can see
covered
that.
Femme Fatale, I think. And maybe a couple of other songs, but these guys definitely, Jesus and Mary Chain, were listening to like White Light, White Heat and stuff. And you can hear the influence of that. You can hear the influence of like Black Angel Death Song on this record, too.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things they said is they recorded Psycho Candy in reaction to the fucking awful pop music of the mid 80s.
Which we just went and said we kind of liked.
Yeah,
all
some of it's good. Well, I mean, it's like anything else. Like, and you look at I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube last night. And the video for Just Like Honey is so like, it almost looks like you could make like a Saturday Night Live skit on it now, because it's like these like, short, skinny Scottish guys, pasty Scottish guys with this weird dark hair, all of them. And they look kind of like greasers in a way. And they're all just like standing there playing their instruments and like kind of looking at the camera with glassy eyes. And like the drummer just has like a snare drum and a tom, and he's like, just like, boom, 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 and it's like, oh my God, like this is a thing, I guess. I mean, it probably would have been one of those things. I mean, I guess it's still cool, you know?
Yeah.
Have you seen that video?
I'm trying to remember. Like I remember seeing. I think it's April Skies that I saw, which is a great song off of the next album that I remember seeing.
Okay. Do you remember the SNL skit? Not Sprockets.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I feel like
did they seem
Sprockets
kind of
is like German, but it was like kind of like I feel like that's kind of
just kind of art school dropout kind of thing or whatever.
Yeah.
I do think they had a bit of a vibe of like we're sort of art school know-it-alls and stuff. But then that vibe was mixed with their we're Scottish and we're going to fight all the time vibe too, which I think was kind of I think
like we can get into a bar brawl and like shatter beer bottles over people's heads if we want to.
Exactly, but also we know Andy Warhol paintings.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For
like
sure. Totally. Which is cool. I kind of dig. It's like
I do too.
A lot of these songs kind of sound like if the Brian Jonestown Massacre wasn't as weird.
Oh yeah.
Do you know that band?
I've seen Dig, the movie, but I was never sold on this guy's genius or whatever.
I like Anton. I think he's very eccentric and he's very kind of.
But it seemed like the
confrontational.
Yeah, I guess this is going to seem unfair because my only real exposure is from that movie. I felt the movie was trying really hard to sell me on him being confrontational stuff. Was part of his genius, but I never heard it in the songs.
Yeah,
he worked with Miranda Lee Richards, who I really like.
Oh yeah.
She's in that movie too, but I never really bought the Brian Jones. It felt like a piece of propaganda, actually, on behalf of the Dandy Warhols. That movie.
You think so?
I really did. Yeah.
That's interesting because I kind of thought that the way they framed that was the Dandy Warhols were just kind of like riding the Brian Jonestown Massacre's coattails.
Exactly, but in a Blur versus Oasis kind of, pick a side, and either side you pick, it's better for both of them. You know what I mean? Like I felt like they were trying to create that with that movie.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
So a lot of self-mythologizing. But anyway,
it's very indulgent.
Yeah, but the thing is that's not really a fair judgment on the music because I never really sat down. Like I'll say that I watched the movie and I didn't feel like going and listening to the records after that.
Yeah.
But Jesus and Mary Chain, I also feel like Jesus and Mary Chain are kind of like a band that showed up a little early for what
they were ahead of their time for sure. I mean, I feel like this album could have come out, in the early 2000s with the Strokes and all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And like them and Interpol would have like toured together and stuff,
This exact album could have come out then. It would have been produced maybe a little bit different, but it probably they would have gotten Amy Winehouse to sing.
Yeah, for sure.
They could have a girl group thing.
So, do you know there's a girl, Sky Ferreira?
I've heard of her. But.
She sings a song with. She does a song with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's from one of their later albums. It's a Jesus and Mary Chain song, but she sings on it. And I listened to a few, like maybe the first 30 seconds of it. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think she's kind of like not a pop singer, but I think she kind of is like more like an indie pop kind of deal. I don't know. I'm not familiar with her work that much, but I had never heard this album before. I will be completely honest and say I'd never listened to this album before choosing it for this year.
Really?
No. I just, which is kind of crazy, and I very ambitious, and I did do my best to do as much research on it as I could. So obviously, if you hear any kind of black holes, or feel free to correct me because I know you're quite familiar with this album.
Yeah. So I've had the album in my collection for a long time.
Yeah.
My first. Did you listen to Jesus Mary Chain before or any of this? Or
not really.
So really, so you're like on a shoegaze jag.
I am.
Now,
Yeah.
right? So this is why this is coming
Heaven.
Out. Yeah.
Because doing the Deaf Heaven album. I was kind of just, My Bloody Valentine. Like I had always heard of all these bands and they've kind of been mythologized a little bit, but I just kind of went all in, and I've been listening to My Bloody Valentine, Loveless, and this album for pretty much nonstop for the past 2 weeks. And the Deaf Heaven album too.
Yeah. So you've been kind of having this shoegaze renaissance going on, which is pretty cool. That's pretty cool music. Psycho Candy is kind of proto shoegaze, and I definitely think shoegaze quickly moves kind of past this in the sense of like, I think Loveless is probably the sort of shoegaze album, right?
Sure.
But I think you don't get to Loveless without Psycho Candy first. Yeah. My first exposure to Jesus and Mary Chain, so I kind of put them in a category with, of all things, Love and Rockets. Do you know Love and Rockets?
Yeah.
So when I was...
Aren't they like...
they don't really sound exactly the same, but they were the guys from Bauhaus, right? And then they did Tones on Tail, and then they did Love and Rockets, right? Yeah. And when I was... like 88, 89, listening to pop radio, like the thing that was cool about KRBE in Houston, where I was listening to, is that they would play, you know, like Pour Some Sugar on Me or something.
Yeah.
But then right after it, they'd play So Alive by Love and Rockets.
Oh, cool.
So I think it's KRBE. It may have been KEGL in Dallas when I moved to Waxahachie, but I think it sounds more like KRBE. Played Head On from Jesus and Mary Chain's third album, Automatic, which is a great sort of just straightforward rocker.
Yeah.
You know, makes you want to blow the stars from the sky. You might know it from the Pixies did a cover of it.
Oh, did they? Okay, cool.
So really, really cool song. And like, I didn't know the difference between like the Jesus and Mary Chain and like Def Leppard. You know, like to me, they were just all rock bands.
music.
It's all rock bands. But I knew I liked that song, right?
Yeah.
And then they had like a song on the Crow soundtrack, and like they did Sometimes Always with Hope Sandoval in the Midnights.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So, but it almost felt like Jesus and Mary Chain. It was like they were this thing that happened, and then like I don't know, like they never sort of regained the place where they probably would have been if they'd just been a few years later, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you know, sometimes you say, oh, this band was ahead of their time, right? But this is almost like a case of a band that was ahead of their time, but then when their time came, they were kind of put aside for the bands that were influenced by them.
Yeah, that's true.
And I kind of feel bad about that. It is really, because I think Psycho Candy is such a great record. So it was later that I cycled back into Psycho Candy after having Automatic was the first like Jesus and Mary Chain album that I got.
Okay. So you kind of Psycho Candy wasn't the first thing that you.
No, because in 86 or 85, you know, like I was listening to. Probably 85, I wasn't even listening to oldies yet. I was probably just listening to like kids' music at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
85 is the first year that I remember being aware of the year it was. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Like, I remember being like, oh, I think it was before that. It must have happened in 84. But it was like, I was in kindergarten. So for the first time, we're writing dates on stuff, right? Oh, it's 19. Oh, it's.
See, that didn't click to me till 91, till A Tribe Called Quest.
Really?
Yeah, man. Like, that's because that's when I remember. And I mean, like Young MC and all that stuff that I liked before that.
Right.
I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I remember the Tribe Called Quest album, you know, like I talked about in the 1990 episode, you know, with Check the Rhyme. That was a very seminal moment for me, and that's when I remembered like what year music started to remember what year music came out, what year I started listening to it.
Right. I get that. Yeah. 1991's a good year for it too. That's going to be a fun year to talk about. It's a big year for music.
A huge year.
Yeah. So. But so anyway, my going back to like Jesus and Mary Chain is like I kind of cycled back to Psycho Candy probably in the early 2000s. I got it probably. So cool. I got Automatic first. I probably had Automatic starting in like 96 or something, and kind of lived with that for a while. Crow soundtrack. So they were kind of like.
I noticed they had a song on the Crow soundtrack last night when I was doing some research, and I didn't even realize that. Yeah.
It's a pretty good song. You know, they kind of fit in with that whole sort of goth vibe. Although they're not a goth band at all, but they kind of have the look and
they have the look of a goth band for sure. Like they're wearing mostly black and stuff, but definitely they're not like, you know, they're not Bauhaus or Joy Division or something like that.
Right.
But, the second song on this album, The Living End, we kind of talked about a little bit earlier before we started recording, and I feel like a band that was kind of popular in the early 2000s. They heard that song and they were like, we're gonna make a band based on that one song. And the name of the band is the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
I feel like the BRMC was just like, oh, The Living End, man. Like, I take a ride on my motorbike, and like somebody just like saw that song in their head and they saw their whole future. Like, oh, fuck yeah, man.
I gotta tell you, there's two bands that did that then, because there's a band from the 90s. It's a kind of a rockabilly rock band called The Living End. They're from Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
And they were named after that song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I thought that's where you were going with that.
No, dude.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that band. I remember that band. They had one album that I really, really liked back in like the late 90s.
I had a friend who was really, really into them, but I liked them, but I only heard them in the context of my friend.
They were one of those bands, their bass player played an upright bass and stuff.
Right.
Like the Necromantics. Did you ever listen to them? They were kind of like you were talking about like Man or Astro Man.
Right.
They're kind of like that. The Necromantics. They're kind of this playful weird. They have a song called like Die Cheerleader or something. It's ridiculous. Apparently like they're from a Scandinavian country. I don't remember which one, but two of the dudes in that band were in like the Swedish Navy, and they were like in a submarine for like 4 months, and they were like, "Are you?" Oh, they found out they were both into like psychobilly, and they were
That's
like,
awesome.
"Let's start a band
I'm
when
just
we
like
get back."
Psychobilly Submarine. That's the name of my. When I get the Gretsch, we're going to write a song called Psychobilly Submarine. Man,
sounds
that's going to
great,
happen.
man.
That will happen, and we will release it on the show. What do you say?
Ooh, sounds good to me. I'll play bass on it if you want. I mean, if
Swedish
you're cool with it.
Psychobilly Submarine.
Yeah, I don't know if they're from Sweden, but one of those
Yeah,
Scandinavian countries, maybe Finland or Norway or something. I don't know.
That's too
but
awesome.
It's pretty awesome. So
Yeah, but going back to Living In, man, what do you think about that track?
it's
That's
so
one of
kick ass.
Yeah,
It's just like
play a little bit of it, man. We
let's
got to
do
hear it.
It's just like it makes you feel fucking cool. It's like it just makes you want to go out and buy a motorcycle. Like honestly, let's listen to a little bit of it.
Listen to that treble, man.
Yeah. And like listen to that fuzz that's buried in the mix a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So kick ass.
And this is,
man.
I'm going to go back to the Shangri-La's thing, because this is
let's do it.
like a Shangri-La's song, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't quite sound like one, you wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
it's a song about a guy who beefs it on his motorcycle and bleeds his blood into his boots and everything at the end, right? Like
Pretty
it's almost
much, yeah.
Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah,
you know
it
what
is,
I mean?
it is, for sure,
Like,
yeah.
and it's so cool, but you can hear that influence of the
Yeah.
Shangri-La's is not just like the
Yeah.
sonic sound of it,
Yeah.
like you got the Ronettes in Just Like Honey, you know.
Yeah.
It's
So Leader of the Pack, is that the
it's
song?
Leader of
here?
the Pack.
Yeah.
It's but from it's this he's the leader of the pack.
yeah,
though.
yeah.
This is
for
his
sure.
song.
It's like from his perspective.
Yeah, exactly. It's Leader of the Pack from
God,
his
that's
perspective.
so good. You hit the nail right on the head, man. It's so perfect. But yeah, that is just a really, really amazing track, man. Yeah, totally. And I wanted. It's interesting because in High Fidelity, when they're talking about the top 5 songs about death or whatever,
Right.
And
He beefs
Jack
it,
Black
yeah.
says the Leader of the Pack is one of them, and I do want to bring up High Fidelity again because I thought it was interesting how, and you kind of rebutted this a little bit because I brought this up to you probably about a week ago. You probably remember this. There's a scene in that movie where Jack Black's character is walking around the record store that they work in with this guy who loves Echo and the Bunnymen, right?
Right.
And he's kind of fixated on Echo and the Bunnymen, and Jack Black's like, well, you haven't heard the Jesus and Mary chain? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, they picked up where Echo left off, and you're screaming about no more Echo albums. I can't believe you don't own this record. And what's ironic to me is that Echo and the Bunnymen released maybe their best album in 1987, 2 years after this album. So
Yeah.
they were contemporaries. They were both making albums at the same time. That statement kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, I think
you know?
but they continued to make records is what I think the point is, right?
Yeah.
So by the perspective of 99 or whenever, High Fidelity came out,
Yeah.
like Jesus and Mary Chain was still around and Echo and the Bunnymen really weren't, right? Like I don't think they released
I
any new
see.
albums at all. So I think what he's
Yeah.
saying is like, hey, you haven't listened to Darklands, you haven't listened to I'm blanking on the names of their albums from the Honey. Anyway, you haven't listened to Automatic. You haven't listened to these other
Honey's
records.
Dead.
Honey's Dead.
Stoned
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Dethroned.
Stoned and Dethroned. Like this is like the continuation of what Echo was doing, which I don't know that I even agree with that. But I think that's the point that he's trying to get at, is that a lot of times people will bellyache that certain bands don't exist anymore, but they have people who are kind of continuing in that vein that they will ignore,
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
but it's the whole point of that scene is to show what a freaking snob Jack Barry is in that movie.
Of
You know what I
course,
mean?
of
He's
course,
just
yeah.
he's telling a guy, this is how you ought to think
Yeah.
and be,
Yeah,
and it's
and
like,
then like, how come you don't own Blonde on Blonde? What's wrong with you?
yeah.
kind of
Although,
thing.
how could he not own Blonde on
I
Blonde?
mean,
Come
yeah,
on, man.
Come
That
on.
album-
That's seriously. So I'm going to play another song for you, and it's not from Psycho Candy, but it is another Jesus and Mary Chain song. I'm going to just play a little bit of it if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please. Always down.
I don't know if you've heard it, but this is a song called Mood Rider, and this is from their album that was released in 2017.
I haven't heard it.
I saw the video for this song last night. It's really interesting. I think it kind of has to do with like prescription drug use and that kind of thing, and like Mood Rider, but it's very I don't
This
know.
is awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. It's kind of like mid-tempo too, you know. But the vocals are their singer is very distinct.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times I feel like having the raspy low voice like is kind of passé, but he really pulls it off.
I think he does. I wonder, I was thinking about while I was listening to it this week, whether or not that influenced the guys in the Stone Roses or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
It's
that,
spiritualized in all those bands.
yeah, I wonder because that sort of, I was listening to, what's the song off of Psycho Candy? It's The Hardest Walk is what I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
Check this out. This is a really great,
Yeah.
like, and again, just the quality of the songwriting is really good. These chord changes remind me of a Stone Roses song called The Hardest Thing in the World.
Okay.
Do you know that song?
I don't.
The point that I want to make is just like the turn here at the chorus is very much,
Definitely sounds like girl group influence on this track too. Can you hear that?
like the what influence?
The girl group influence.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
The
multiple
drums,
times
that-
through it, you can hear that. Yeah, Sowing Seeds, it shows up
Yeah,
again, you
for
know.
sure. It's so good, man.
Yeah, so it's like it's an influence, like lyrically too. Lyrically, a lot of the poetry on this is really straight ahead too.
Yeah,
like
agreed.
which I think is
There's not
intentional
anything
choice.
you read into or anything like that. It's all plug and play. which
And I think
like about
that's
it.
totally like the girl group thing, right?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
So, also going to the girl group thing, that was one of the big things I wanted to talk about. There's also the sonic signature of this album are those distorted guitars, and it's kind of like an 80s recreation of the Wall of Sound, but without
Yeah.
using reverb. I mean, there is reverb on this
Yeah.
album, but it's not like an 80s reverb way that you would think, like, and I started thinking, I'm like, I wonder if that big 80s arena rock drum sound is a kind of tribute to the Phil Spector Wall of Sound thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that.
Could be.
But I was thinking, like, what's great to me is that that Jesus and Mary Chain figure out a way to do it that's not that. That's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
this 80s rock cliche.
Yeah.
Instead, it's
Yeah.
just this huge wash of noisy guitars
Right,
that
right.
make everything sound huge. And I think if you strip them out, if you listen, you strip those out, the songs are very sort of plain and straightforward. And I don't mean that in an insulting
Yeah.
way, but I mean like it's that girl group. I mean, the same way with the Wall of Sound. If you strip the big sort of sound of "Be My Baby" out, it's actually a very simple, basic kind of song. Right?
All those songs are very simple.
Right.
I feel like the production added that dimension to them.
Exactly, and I think I guess
The
what I'm
same
getting
thing's
at is they
working
figured
here.
out a way to do the
Yeah,
same thing without
absolutely.
having 3 drummers and
It's
14
not like
guys playing the
Andrew
castanets or
WK
something.
kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah,
right,
it's
right, right. Like
You get like 17 drum tracks, man. Like, yeah.
But I think that what they I'm not gonna say they stumbled on, but what they discovered, what they added to music was a way to create something huge and shimmering and beautiful like the Wall of Sound
Yeah.
without needing a bunch of personnel. And
Yeah.
that's the legacy of this album, the big
Yeah.
legacy of this album,
Yeah.
because that becomes shoegaze.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And like the Stone Roses and Spiritualized and all those shoegaze
Right.
bands. My Bloody Valentine, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. You can
Shoegaze
hear-
is an interesting topic
and
too,
that's why
because
I wanted to, and I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
go
that's
for it.
why I wanted to choose this album because shoegaze always intrigued me. And I really kind of wanted to sink my teeth into it and pretty much have, especially after Death Heaven, Sunbather, because that stuff is definitely influenced heavily by shoegaze. But would you say Oasis is a shoegaze band?
No.
Okay,
no.
I didn't think so.
They were. I mean, they were really just kind of a
Rock
mainstream
band.
rock band.
Yeah.
But I think I would fold them in with Britpop. I think they fit
Yeah.
with Britpop. And Britpop was kind of grew out of shoegaze, but also was a rival to shoegaze. And this is the point that I want to make about shoegaze is that it was not well traveled in its time.
Yeah.
Like it was ridiculed.
Really?
It was it was
Critically?
not critically some of those bands had some critical success. This album was well reviewed,
Yeah.
Psycho Candy was. Loveless, I'm not sure what Loveless's point of was, but what the critics thought of Loveless, but I know that even the term shoegazing was a knock on the genre.
Because they're just looking at their shoes, looking at the floor. Yeah.
Right. So the idea was that they had no show, they had no personality, right?
Right.
And the bands that were called shoegazing bands were, they resisted the title. Lush, all those bands, they didn't
Really?
want to be called shoegaze.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
No, because it was sort of seen as, music that's not, these people have no stage presence, they have no interest. It seemed it was a knock on them,
Right.
and so they all tried to come up with other names.
Is that a critical term? Like, is that a term a critic came up with? Shoegaze?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I think it's from the NME or something. It sounds like an
Sounds like
they
it,
also had a name, and I don't think it was just shoegaze, but it was related to shoegaze, where they called it the scene that celebrates itself. Have you ever heard that? So there was like a music scene of all these bands that were kind of, and they were shoegaze adjacent at least, but I think like some of these bands were related to it. And that's a very knock on these bands too.
Yeah.
Like, the scene that celebrates itself.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you learn why they called it that. It's because they played in each other's bands and would go to each other's show.
See,
oh
but
dear,
that's
oh
stupid.
my gosh,
Yeah.
these guys liked each other and they liked their music,
Well,
and
it's
somehow you're
funny.
going to knock it.
It's funny though, because that was the same kind of thing with grunge.
Right.
Like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Mudhoney, like that. They all played in each other's bands and went to each other's shows and supported each other. Like,
Yeah,
what's
part
the
of what
problem?
was weird about Nirvana is that they were kind of outsiders in that
yeah.
group, even.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it was like, but see, I guess it's weird because, and maybe it's a British thing. I don't know. Like, the
Maybe.
shoegaze sort of takes off in the UK, really. Like, all those bands are really UK bands.
Yeah.
I guess the point that I was trying to get at is that these bands were, mixed critical success at best in their time, but somehow the allure of shoegaze has outlasted almost any other genre from that time period.
Yeah.
No one talks about Manchester anymore. No one talks about grunge, really. I mean, I'm a walking like grunge billboard, but nobody. I mean, that stuff is still influential, but it's you don't hear people saying, "Oh, this is a neo grunge band," right?
Yeah, when you say no one talks about Manchester anymore, what are some examples?
Oh,
there?
Madchester.
Madchester.
Yeah. So do you know about the Madchester scene?
I don't.
So okay, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because we're going to talk about it one day when we talk about the Stone Roses. But the Happy Mondays, Stone Roses, it's all this dance rock stuff from the late 80s, early 90s. Very rave culture related and
like
stuff.
24-hour party people.
Yeah,
and shit.
exactly. That's exactly that. Yeah.
I noticed you put a Happy Mondays song on the 1990.
That song is hilarious. You're twisting my melon, man.
I never got into them. And Henry Rollins, he's notorious for hating that band so much.
Oh, really?
Fucking Happy Mondays are terrible. Like he said in one of
They
his
kind of
books.
are terrible, but
Yeah.
that's what's fun about
Really?
them. Yeah, no, I mean,
Well, one of the dudes in the Happy Mondays ended up in the Mescaleros, Joe Strummer's band.
oh, that doesn't
Yeah,
surprise me.
yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And I mean, like, the lead singer of the Happy Mondays is the one who sings "Dare" by the Gorillaz. It's coming.
Oh,
out.
really?
It's Dare. Yeah, that's
did not
him.
know that.
Yeah. So like,
That's cool.
So the Happy Mondays were like a bunch of drunks, basically,
Yeah.
and they're totally like reckless, crazy kind of guys,
Yeah.
and they made this really like goofy kind of music. Like,
So funny.
it's just really, that's a whole other topic. But Madchester was at the time that it was 85 is a little early for Manchester, but like the Stone Roses record their first stuff in like 87, 88
Okay.
or something. So it's on its way in,
Yeah.
And I think it was influenced by Jesus and Mary Chain. But I guess the point that I was trying to make is that like those scenes aren't, like, they still influence music, and people still put like Stone Roses albums at the top of lists in the UK and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, it's still pretty well respected, but no one's trying to do that still. But shoegaze, for some reason, still has a cachet.
It does
And I
still
think-
have a cachet.
and I think
agreed.
that's kind of cool. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
what's neat is it's almost like garage rock in the 60s or something like, which kind of disappeared for a while and then sort of filtered
Right.
its way back in, and then
Right.
suddenly, boom, you have the White Stripes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to find, like, if someone said, I'm from the future, and in the 2020s, shoegaze is going to make a big revival, and a bunch of bands are going to sound like My Bloody Valentine,
Yeah.
but with like Christina Aguilera vocals or something. I mean, it'd be some weird like
Yeah.
mutant thing.
like
I
Taylor-
would not be too surprised by
Yeah.
that. Yeah, Taylor Swift's
Taylor Swift.
shoegaze phase in the 20s is like,
man. That's wow.
But what I'm saying, but you get what I'm getting at.
yeah,
right?
for sure.
And I think that all starts with Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, these the band members. So it's two brothers, Jim and William Reed, are the main band members, songwriters, I suppose. And I just pulled up like a Rolling Stone article for when they went on the reunion tour for this album and that kind of thing. And 30th anniversary of Psycho Candy. Can you believe it? 1985 was over 30 years ago.
Yeah, I just
There was-
turned 40, so like to me,
Yeah.
like I've been thinking about a lot of that stuff. It just seems impossible.
This is really dumb, but I was watching a football game before coming over here. Florida and Vanderbilt were playing in a football game, and they were saying Florida. The last time Vanderbilt beat Florida was 1988. And one of the commentators, like the color guy, was like, "Yeah, it doesn't look like they're going to snap the 30-year streak here." I was like, 1988 was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
What? It's crazy, man.
That really is crazy. That's
Yeah.
nuts.
It's pretty nuts. And yeah, so this
This
was,
doesn't sound like an album that's like 30 years ago. Like when I
Yeah.
was a kid, 30 years was like Elvis
the
or
50s.
something.
Yeah,
right.
I
You know what
remember
mean?
my dad saying like 20 years ago in the 60s, like, wow.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
when I was a kid, that was ancient history. Like that might as well have been the music the Romans listened to. You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
yeah.
And now to think like, oh, Psycho Candy is
Yeah,
like,
is 30 years old, and 30 years ago was 1985, the mid 80s. It's crazy to think, So, I think there's a brief interview with Jim here, and he says, I saw something with the vivid memories about making this record. I remember we had quite a professional attitude towards the recording process. People probably imagined that we just fell into the studio off our tits and made a record. But there was no drink and no drugs at the time in the studio. We went in there and just set about making a record as well as we could. In later years, recording would be a very fucked up affair, but at the time, we had quite a professional work ethic. So.
I can believe that. I mean, I'm not saying the album sounds labored over because it doesn't,
Yeah.
but it does sound like they're serious about making it. You know what I mean? It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like Be Here Now or something where it's like
Right,
all
right.
like stretched out or anything.
Yeah.
Although with a name like Psycho Candy, it does seem like the sort of acid revival stuff
What I heard
is kind of tied into
when
it.
I started listening, before I listened to this album, I thought that it would be kind of more psychedelic and more kind of weirdo kind of stuff. And it's really not.
No, it's not really. It's much more straightforward with just that sheen on it. I think.
Yeah, which I love.
You want to hear a little bit of Never Understand?
Yeah, let's
That
do it.
is a track that's one of the singles from it. Again,
do
with
it.
the feedback.
Let me turn. Yeah. Oh yeah. See, this almost sounds like Beach Boys or something.
Yeah, well,
Totally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the Beach Boys were influenced heavily by girl groups, so it doesn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
surprise.
yeah.
But yeah, this was like a Get Around or
Yeah,
something,
for
right?
sure, for sure.
But then those crazy screaming guitars. Or
And I
whatever.
like how some of these songs are like major key in a really awesome way.
Yeah,
It's kind of like it's
unapologetically.
yeah,
like
exactly.
that's why like we talked about their kind of goth look or whatever.
Yeah,
but they don't really sound like that.
Yeah,
kind
it's
of thing.
unsuspecting, and I didn't think a lot of these songs would be straight up major key bangers when I first put this on. I
Mm-hmm.
was really surprised to hear that influence, and when you told me like, yeah, just like Honey is just Be My Baby, dude. Like I was like, oh, really? I couldn't believe it, you
Yeah.
know. So, and then I listened to it, and I was like, hell yeah, this is awesome. Like, it's totally different than what I thought in the best way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So another thing from this interview is pretty good. Psycho Candy has a nasty guitar sound. How much of that was invented in the studio? And the answer was that was just chaos. It just suggested itself. We wanted the guitars to be as out there as possible. We wanted a fucked up, distorted sound. And we had these pedals that we used. They did most of the work themselves. You just plugged them in and they started screeching like you wouldn't believe. That was the sound.
Yeah.
And that sounds really stupid and really juvenile and really like we just plugged them in and they made noise, but it's really not. It's
that's-
really kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's what I mean by it being like an indie extremist
Yeah,
album. Because
yeah.
it's like we got a straightforward rock song. You could record this album straightforward, and you know what? It would be a good pack of songs. It
Yeah.
would be fine. But it's like this is where like one single aesthetic choice can elevate something incredibly, right? And I think the White Stripes kind of come back to this later, like where it's like I remember reading, episode 5 of my ongoing war with 90s guitar magazines, but the or
You have a
2000s
very good
in this
reason
case.
to wage this war.
Yeah, so
too.
I remember reading a guitar magazine, and they had just done a thing on Jack White. So it was probably
Yeah,
actually like
yeah.
2002, 2003, something like that. And this guy was complaining. He was like, "You guys put Jack White on the cover,
Yeah.
from the White Stripes,
Yeah.
but I can play better than him. And
Yeah.
I can play
Oh,
faster
dude, there
than
was
him,
so much of
and
that
I can
back
play
then.
smoother than him. Why is it that you guys are putting him on the cover and
Yeah.
not me?" And it was like the response from Guitar Hero was, or I don't remember which guitar.
World
Yeah,
or
it was.
whatever,
I don't know if it was
one of those,
Guitar Player or Guitar World, or you know what? I don't even want to decide. But I remember they said something like, it was very navel gazy for the guitar magazine world, but they were saying like, you know, we often emphasize technique and we often emphasize, you know, musicianship and tightness and all this stuff. But, you know, what it comes down to, though, is sometimes it's just about making certain aesthetic choices over others and sticking with them.
Yeah.
And which was very actually kind of wise from these guys, you know.
Yeah.
But it was
It's a good
almost
response. I agree.
I actually agree that sometimes the music, there's another quote that I pull out all the time. And in fact, at some point, we're going to get it like written, stenciled on the wall here.
Oh, yeah?
It's one of our favorite quotes. It's from Richard Thompson, the great guitar player Richard Thompson. And he said, the music is in the edges. In other words, if you try to make something perfect, if you try to make it smooth and perfect and all this, you're losing what is unique about it. You're losing what is special about it. You're losing the edge. So it's that little goof up that's great. You remember we were talking about the Breeders, and you talked about her voice cracking.
Her voice cracking,
yeah, exactly. You said Tar Baby.
Yeah.
That's the music. You know, that's where the music actually is.
Yeah.
And this album seems to understand that. Like that just wall of noise is an aesthetic choice to say this is what we sound like this is us, this is our sound, and I think it's a deliberate choice, but in a way, like I said earlier, they almost like kind of stumble into this thing that blows up into its own genre eventually.
Right.
But it's just that single choice to use those distorted boxes and go with that buzzy sound.
Totally. Well, and it just like we were talking about people being pissed off that Nirvana kicked Guns N' Roses off the radio. Mm-hmm. The same people were pissed off that the White Stripes were so popular because their music was so simple.
Right.
Just like you said, it was like, you know, people were like, a Rolling Stone has such a bias for Jack White and it's almost ridiculous, and they're the only reason he's popular, and he sucks. He plays like these old fucking Sears guitars that are shitty, and somehow everybody loves them. And it's like, it's interesting music, man. Like,
he worked those limitations intentionally.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And he talks about that a lot in the that It Might Get Loud, that documentary that he did, like Jimmy Page and the Edge, which is actually better than I thought it would be. I really thought it was going to be insanely indulgent, but it's really
it's good.
It is, but it's not in the way you think, I guess, you know. So
I have to see it again. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember enjoying it. I like all those guys, so it's fine with me.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think that's a lot of that is at play here too.
I think it's like the choice, just like there's a choice to, you know, like the White Stripes later would say, okay, we're going to not have a lot of instruments. We're going to have Meg playing very simplistic, kind of straightforward stuff, and I'm going to play an airline guitar, which is plastic and cracks in half, you know, and we're going to see what we get from this sound.
Right.
It's like the Jesus and Mary Chain are saying, okay, we've got these songs, we want to make it like a Shangri-La's album, but let's put this wash of noise on it, you know?
Yeah,
like
sure.
that's our aesthetic choice. That's what we're bringing to it that nobody else is doing. And I think that one thing that I wish someone had kind of instructed me as a young songwriter, you know, like back when I was, would have been an encouragement in that direction.
Yeah.
Because I think we really, not that we were trying to be real meticulous or anything, but I think with us, we were influenced by so many things that every song sounded kind of different. It was like a monster into itself.
Sure.
And it's probably the Beatles thing, because you listen to Revolver and it's like, it's like a chocolate box with just so many different things, right? But sometimes I think just the choice, like to have like a single unifying thing, especially on a first album. Yeah. Because the other thing is Jesus and Mary Chain never do this again. Yeah. It's like one album of that noise and then...
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's what I was really kind of taken aback by. Like their second album has none of this distortion on it. You know, it's the songs are similar, but it's not trebly. It's not just like crazy pedals and stuff. And I found that kind of interesting. I felt like it was kind of like, well, we did that, okay, and we're good, and you know, now we're going to evolve maybe a little bit.
I think that's exactly what happened, and I don't know that April Skies, for instance, which is on the next album, would be better if it had Psycho Candy production.
Exactly.
It would fit really great on this album that way. But I don't know that it would be a better song.
Right.
I guess the later Jesus and Mary Chain albums, I do wish there was a little bit more Psycho Candy DNA in them, but like 30% more or something.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, like they
I-
don't need to just keep making that album over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
But almost if they had learned a little bit, like My Bloody Valentine learned a lot from them, if they'd learned a little bit more from My Bloody Valentine and then move forward, I think those other albums would have been even better. But.
So let me give a brief update on the beverage situation here.
Okay, how we doing?
I probably drank more of the Tab than I did of the Zima, but I can't say I like it that much better. it's not so great.
I'm almost done with mine.
Really?
I don't like it that much.
Yeah.
I don't. There's a video of me and Thomas about my buddy Thomas drinking these about 6 months ago.
Really?
So I have actually started to try to not develop a taste for it, but a tolerance
in
for it.
Anticipation.
Yeah,
for
yeah. This is all
episode.
built up, but so you got to see that. We should share that video through Twitter because it's pretty funny. Like him and me. I try to make Evie drink it and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's good.
What
But
did Evie think of it?
she hates. She spits it out immediately. At one point, I tell her, "All right, drink this, and I'll give you a pony." And she says, "No." And I was like, "Not even for a pony."
She's like, no, sorry. Oh, that's great, man. So yeah. So what else do you think about this album? Is there anything else you want to say?
Just that I love it, and I know I've talked at length about the girl group influence on it,
Sure.
but I had said something earlier in the 63 episode, I think, where I was talking about girl group influence just disappears at a certain point.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
And
Was
it
this
kinda-
maybe the last kind of bastion of it, you think?
Well, that's what I guess I was getting at, is that this is definitely an example of people adapting that and showing kind of the durability of some of those ideas
Yeah.
and recontextualizing it so they're not just doing like a throwback, like Tracy Ullman did a song or whatever that was like intentionally just a pastiche of like 60s
Really?
stuff. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
That's
They Don't
interesting.
Care About Us or whatever.
Oh,
which is-
okay.
If you know that song. But this isn't a pastiche of that. This is an evolution of that.
Right,
And I think that's
right.
great. And I don't really, you might be able to like the Pipettes or something, but I think maybe Amy Winehouse. Maybe it's until Amy Winehouse that you don't really see it pop up again.
Yeah,
So I'm happy to see it, to hear it here. I'm happy you picked it just so I could talk about girl groups again.
yeah.
Oh, by the way,
What's up?
thank you for that girl group.
Oh
album.
yeah, so we didn't do. I bought Chris a present for his birthday, and it wasn't. We weren't able to get him to open it on the air. I was actually getting ready to wrap it, so he came over, and I drove us down to the Breeders' Show, and I was getting ready to wrap his gift, and as I got the wrapping paper out, he knocked on my door.
Yeah, I showed up early.
And
I
he
was
was like,
"Sorry."
"Hey, I'm a little early." So I said, "Well, I have your birthday present, but I was going to wrap it, but now that you're here, I'm just going to give it to you." So I got Chris the Numero Records is a great reissue label out of, I believe, Chicago, and they find all this really, really amazing obscure music, and they get it licensed properly, and they re-release it on very, very nice, vinyl pressings and that kind of thing. And one of their more recent reissues is called Basement Beehive. The girl group Underground, and I saw this and I said, Chris has to have this. So I got it for him at Waterloo Records, actually, and it was funny too because I went to Waterloo, made a special trip to Waterloo just so I could get it for you. And the guy, I couldn't find it, and the guy that was working there helped me find it. And he goes, "Dude, this comp is amazing. Like, it's so good. It's been selling like crazy. I'm surprised we even have 2 copies left." So, yeah, Chris, you said you're really liking it, really digging
Yeah,
it
I'm
so
loving
far.
it. There's a lot of stuff on here that I didn't know too, which is great.
Yeah.
There's a couple of tracks that I do. There's a hilarious. So there's a version of the song Gloria. You know Gloria, of
Sure,
course. By
sure.
the version by them. Now, let's say you're going to do a gender swap of this, right?
Okay.
So you can't use Gloria. You're going to use a man's name, right?
Okay.
What song? What man's name would you choose? I know that's like a
George?
I mean, George, maybe
Something with a G?
Gotta try to find something. You know what a name they pick?
Jeff, like Geoff.
Jeffrey, maybe.
Yeah.
Geoff. Yeah,
They did choose like Preston or something.
Melvin.
Seriously?
They chose
Melvin.
Melvin.
I love how you got really up close to the mic
Yeah.
and you're like, Melvin.
Melvin. Melvin. It's so silly.
Is it?
But I love it. It
sounds awesome.
Yeah. No, there are a lot of really cool things. And there's like a track that is almost all a cappella, which is
Really?
really pretty. Yeah. It's like sound like some Destiny's Child could almost do.
Whoa.
It's really, really cool. And there's a lot of them are kind of more like doo-wop influenced and kind of almost later soul influenced too, which is really cool because it's definitely girl group sound, but with like some flavors of this other stuff. There was a track that reminded me of Little Anthony and the Imperials and some stuff like that, which is really great. But it's like or stuff. If you're familiar with the Marvelettes, do you know Hunter's Been Captured by the Game?
No, I don't know that song.
That's a great Smokey Robinson song. Like there's some stuff on there that's in that vibe, which is almost like it's not the Please Mr. Postman stuff. It's the sort of later as they try to grow up stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really cool stuff. And
Sounds
again,
cool.
another thing that's kind of been forgotten to time. So I'm glad to hear that. First and foremost, I love the record. Thank you very much for it.
Absolutely, man.
But
of
I'm also
course.
glad to hear that other people are getting into it because
Yeah.
it's, again, a kind of like a little bit of lost history there.
Absolutely. So, my friend Kevin Moss, who I bring up a lot, friend of the podcast, 1/3 of the great B-movie podcast, Junk Food Dinner. He posted recently on Instagram of another numero release called the Jackie Shane Collection. Are you familiar with this? I think it's
Shane?
something in that same vein. Yeah, they re-released it, and I told him, I said, "Hey, have you heard the Girl Group Company?" He was like, "Yeah, I got that one too. It's really great." But it says, let's see, he said Jackie has a remarkable. Oh, it's transgender. Oh, wow, I didn't even realize that.
Okay.
In an era when it was basically unthinkable, and as incredible as their story is, the tunes are equally as compelling. So apparently, a transgender singer who made albums and singles and stuff. So that's pretty interesting.
That is very interesting. Okay.
It's like, did you hear the Lemmy from Motorhead, the documentary where he talks about Little Richard?
I think you told me about it. I haven't seen it myself.
So Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead, the Beatles and Little Richard are like his two favorite bands, believe it or not. And he was talking about Little Richard, and he said, "Can you imagine being black and gay in Macon, Georgia in 1956?" He goes, "All you can do is play rock and roll, mate. That's all you can do." Like, it was so perfect, man. It's like, that's so crazy. Is like, when everyone in society is up against you,
You've gotta be a rock
gotta
star.
be a rock star. And I
Yeah.
think that's so fucking amazing.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, and I think you and I have talked about this. I don't think we said it on the podcast, but I love Little Richard, one of my favorite artists of all time. Amazing that he's still out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
totally.
Little Richard, to me, it's like there's a lot of music from the 50s that would almost be kids' music now. Like you talk about, how dirty, you ain't nothing but a hound dog or something. Like I can play it for Evie, no problem,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If there's any innuendo in it, it's so tame. It's like
It's not like
it doesn't
Cream
exist.
by Prince.
Yeah, right. It's not like that. But I think Little Richard is still pretty like out there. Like I think
Sure.
he's still pretty shocking. Like
Of course.
some of his music, but I mean like even like the intensity of like long tall Sally, it's like
It's in your face and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
For sure, man.
So
Yeah.
MVP.
MVP. Awesome.
I think he's great. I think the one sad thing that I have about this is that we aren't going to go back into the 50s, and I don't think we should. But at some point, we probably ought to have a talk about
we could even do like
50s rock and roll.
50s
or
rock
something.
episode.
I think we should do that at some point because I
Anthology, yeah.
love that so much.
I agree. It's good stuff. Well, cool, man.
Well, you got anything else to say about Psycho Candy?
I think that's about all I wanted to cover. I'm
Beautiful
actually-
album, guys. Check it out.
fantastic
It's
album.
definitely going to shock you, probably, because that treble is something you do not hear a lot of.
And I was going to say, some people that aren't familiar with shoegaze or with some of that stuff, like, definitely take that with a grain of salt, but still listen to this album a few times because it will click. I promise. It's great. It's a very good, very vital piece of rock music, I feel like. Definitely a piece of rock and roll history that needs to be observed and given its fair shake.
And kind of a singular piece, too.
Absolutely.
Like it's its own thing.
Even with the fact that they took a different direction after this album and kind of changed their sound up a little bit. Yeah.
And even among shoegaze, I mean, this is almost, I don't know how people technically in that scene classify, but this is proto shoegaze.
Yeah,
Like this
yeah.
is, even the stuff that came after that copied this went in a different direction. So.
Absolutely.
All right, well then let's go ahead and go to my pick
Let's
for
do it.
1985.
Sounds great, man.
I thought about it a lot. There's a lot of great albums in '85 that I love. King of Rock by Run DMC is a great album.
That was a close.
So
I almost
right
picked
on the
that
borderline.
one.
But
Yeah.
I decided to pick the album that sounds the most like the '80s I could possibly imagine, and this one is so '80s. Here it comes.
You ready for this, guys?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say the '80s? I meant the 1880s. And there he is.
I was wondering how you were gonna
Yeah, there he is, folks. The former king of the rail yard, Tom Waits, with his classic album Rain Dogs. And
Great album.
Oh my God, do I love this album. And yeah, so when I was looking over the list of 1985, it does. It's funny when you're a music fan because a lot of things cross your mind, like, all right, 85. What does 85, like when you hear that name, what explodes in your mind?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Live Aid and, music that sounds like the Thompson Twins.
Yeah,
or whatever.
totally.
But then you look down the list and it's like, well, it's got to be Rain Dogs. Like,
Sure.
that's my favorite album
Yeah.
by far. But it's not really representative of the year very much because it's
Right.
kind of like we were saying that Jesus and Mary Chain is kind of a singular piece.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not singular. Rain Dogs isn't unique within Tom Waits' career,
Right.
but it is an incredibly unique sounding album, and he's a kind of unique sounding artist that I'm not
Yeah.
sure everybody's going to get. So I think I'd just start by saying, what's your history with Tom Waits? What do you think about this
I was
album?
thinking about this earlier, and I don't know where my my appreciation for Tom Waits began. When I was in my early 20s and I was like downloading a lot of music, it was a thing where you would hear a name like Tom Waits and you were like, okay, let me search whatever website I'm stealing music from and see like what song, and there would just be like a handful of songs available to download, and you would I think I downloaded like House Where Nobody Lives and
Right.
a couple of other songs off of like his latter like late 90s albums, and then Old 55, and then
Right.
I got
From
familiar
the
with
early stuff.
Closing Time. Yeah. So that was kind of my first experience with him, but I think the problem that I have with Tom Waits, and this is nothing against Tom Waits at all, it's something against me, is I never sat down at first and listened to one of his whole albums, like front to
Oh,
back.
right.
I just listening
kind of
to
a grab
individual
bag of
tracks.
stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
which is not the best way to experience someone like Tom Waits. So from that though, I grew to have a pretty great appreciation for Mr. Waits. Up until when Orphans was released. You remember
yeah,
Orphans,
absolutely.
of course, and My Baby's Low Down and Fish in the Jailhouse Tonight.
Now,
I can't
I
remember.
know it's Orphans, Brawlers, and Bastards were all
It's
released.
Brawlers, Ballers, and Bastards.
Is that what it is?
3 albums, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so I got them all together, so I don't know the difference
They
between
were
Orphans.
they were
and-
packaged all together at first.
Right.
Orphans is
There's
just the kind of like
That's what they call the whole thing.
that's what they call the whole series or whatever you want to call it.
Sure,
yeah, for sure.
I know the track. I'm going up to see my Lord or whatever on that. It's,
yeah.
it almost sounds like a Salvation Army band is playing in the background. It's like that's part of what I love about. But we'll get into that in a second. So tell me more about. So did you just always kind of listen to a bit of a grab bag, or what was it about Orphans? Is that the album that kind of?
I wouldn't say that's the album that gripped me. I would say Closing Time really had an effect for me. I had a big affinity for Closing Time, but between my love of Closing Time and when Orphans came out, I fixated on a live album of Tom Waits called Dime Store Novels. Do you know that album?
I've never listened to that one.
You've never
I've listened
listened
to
to
Big
it?
Time a lot,
Okay,
but I don't know
okay.
Dime Store.
Dime
Novel.
Store Novels is great, and he's got a version of Diamonds on My Windshield on it, and he tells a lot of the stories that you were talking
Yeah.
about. He tells like Solomon slayed the Philistines with his golden hair or something like that. He tells like a Bible story in it, and that's not completely accurate, but it's very good. And he has this talking about buying this like 65 Buick Skylark, and that was the inspiration behind writing Diamonds on My Windshield, which is a really cool story. And I think he's in Chicago. He's in Colorado. I think he's in Denver because he talks about this is only the second time I've been to Denver. And you go 50. Tom Waits has this thing where it's like he's from everywhere. You
Right,
know? He'd
right.
go to a town and he can just talk about the town like he's lived there all of his life.
Yeah.
And he starts telling this story. He goes, I was over there on 15 and Wazee. You ever been over there 15 and Wazee over there by the train station? And people are like, oh, 15 Wazee. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Meanwhile, like 5 hours earlier,
Excuse
Tom
me.
Waits is like driving into town,
Yeah.
riding down the names of streets so he can bring them up. Hey, when I
Seriously.
tell that story this time,
gotta
he comes
hoot
here.
holla.
He's like,
Yeah.
oh, Koenig and,
Yeah.
and Burnett.
I was over there on Red River Road,
on
6th Street,
Koenig.
Austin, Texas. Let me tell you something. Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Well, that's part of what I love about Tom Waits. So, like, my history with Tom Waits is, I think it was when Mule Variations came out.
Okay,
I heard
okay.
"Hold On."
Oh man,
which is such a great track,
God.
right?
That song just kills me, man. It's so good.
And I saw that on MTV2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had a video for it.
I forgot all about
MTV2. And it was like
MTV2.
he had just signed to Epitaph, I think. Like I think that's his first Epitaph release.
Anti-Epitaph, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, cool. Okay, all right. So who is this guy? You know, like what is he? And so my first discovery of him was kind of, I guess you'd say at the beginning of the late period Tom Waits.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know if that's really fair or mid period. No,
I think that's about right. I think that around this album, before this out, he was still kind of in the mid period on this album, and then I would say the '90s transitioned over to the late period Tom Waits.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was what immediately gripped me is like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
You know? And so then it was like there's a, what I keep forgetting what it's called. I keep trying to call it my early burglary years, which is a Morrissey album. It's it's something like that though. Anyway, there's a collection that Steph found.
Okay.
Of like stuff from Swordfish Trombones
Oh
all
yeah,
the way
he's
up
got like
through.
a kind of not a greatest hits, but something like
It's
that.
kind of like it's kind of a best of collection, but it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nice as like a if you don't know anything about Tom Waits and you're just like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Now it's all the pre-anti stuff, so it's but it goes up through like Black Rider, and I mean it does go kind of late in that mid period. So I guess I would say like it's a best of his mid period, and it's great because it's got tracks off of Rain Dogs, it's got tracks off of Frank's Wild Years, it's got all this stuff, and it's just the wildest thing to listen to.
Yeah,
you know, and so I just fell in love with it. It was
Sure.
later that I went back and tried to listen to like Closing Time.
Oh, really?
And yeah. So
Really?
that was what I sort of cycled back to,
Yeah.
and I'm not as
Way
into
different.
it.
Yeah,
Heart of Saturday Night. Like I'm not as
Yeah.
into even though I like him. You know, it's like it feels like he's developing into the Tom Waits I personally like, which is a
Right.
entirely theatrical creation.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the theater of his voice. Like he sounds often like Louis Armstrong through a distortion pedal,
Yeah.
right? You know, he's like, like we could do the whole second half of this discussion. It's just. I'm sorry, folks. This is eventually going to degrade into me and
it's
Marty just
me
going.
and Chris going. We have a bassoon player that's going to come in and play while we're doing that too.
But he's completely like at a certain point given over to like these characters that he makes to the point where, and we even talked about like him telling stories like just now about, it's like you don't know what is real with Tom Waits or what, you know, who the real Tom Waits is,
you know,
and I kind of don't care.
Well, and that's the thing, because I was going to say, when you just said that, it made me kind of formulate a very quick kind of id to that opinion, or it's kind of like, that's not really important, I guess, you know.
Right.
Because you kind of like when you listen to this music, it kind of sucks you into this different world that's very visceral and visual. Kind of like when we were talking about Sam Cooke, you know, there's a lot of kind of visual things that happen when you listen to this stuff, and you can see like you can see them boarding the cargo ship to Singapore and getting off the boat in Singapore when that song plays. You can see them in the dingy bars, you know, playing weird card games, getting into drinking contests with the locals. Like that's the kind of stuff I think about when I listen to these songs.
But not to I get what you're saying. It's very visual albums for sure. But like in the case of Sam Cooke, a lot of it, like you feel like he's putting, like when he's singing those songs, it's coming from his heart.
Oh,
and soul,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And so part of the appeal there is feeling like you're there in the room with that man, experiencing those things. And soul music in general is often like that.
Sure.
But this is almost like something else. This is like Bertolt Brecht. This is like what's often called pre-rock. They say when talking about Tom Waits, pre-rock styles. Yeah. Well, I mean. Not like that's like post rock or whatever, but I mean like
saying.
pre-rock styles, klezmer, polkas, tangos, all this stuff that just disappeared after the rock era
came.
Yeah, exactly. It's like after the Beatles, no one's listening to polkas anymore. You know what I mean? And he kind of xylophones all over the place. You know what I mean?
Well, just weird like woodwind and brass instruments and stuff, like bassoons and weird stuff like that. Like he played around a lot with these really kind of different tones and was doing stuff that nobody really was doing, I think.
And he was doing it in the 80s
Yeah.
when everything sounds like, like I said, like the Thompson Twins or something,
Yeah,
Or it's
well,
like
and everything
Madonna, and then right after Madonna, you're going to listen to Jockey Full of Bourbon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what? You
Yeah.
know? And he's also got, like, he obviously owes a huge debt to, like, the beat poets of the 50s.
absolutely.
Like, huge. Bukowski,
Yeah.
which I know you're a fan of Bukowski.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, explicitly
Yeah.
loves all of that sort of Kerouac era,
Absolutely.
stuff.
Ginsberg and all that
exactly.
stuff. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
And a lot of that had a huge influence on rock. I mean, the Beatles themselves were Beatles, like there was almost like, but the beatnik thing had died.
Yeah,
And in a way, when Tom Waits' character solidified, it's like all this stuff that was dying off, Waits just sort of filtered into his own weird offbeat personality and
Right.
and turned it into theater, I guess. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about him,
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not a surprise that after Rain Dogs, he does Frank's Wild Years, which is like a theatrical performance. It's basically a record. And he and his wife Kathleen Brennan start to write a bunch of basically like operettas and stuff. So some of my favorite albums by him, like Alice, which is hanging on the wall over here.
Oh, yeah, it is, isn't it?
That's one of my favorite Tom Waits records. I don't know if we'll get around to talking about that someday, but Blood Money. A lot of these are like explicitly theatrical recordings.
Right.
And I just freaking love it.
Well, and this is kind of we were talking about the Bildums Roman in,
yeah.
Vampire Weekend episode. And from what I understand, this album was kind of part of a series in a way, right?
Right.
Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, Frank's Wild Years are kind of
A trilogy?
or kind of a trilogy in a way, from what I understand.
I think
right?
if you listen to them back to back, they all feel like they're of a piece.
Yeah.
I don't know if they tell a coherent story.
Probably not. Yeah, I don't
I think the character that sings them feels very specific. And there is a song on Swordfish Trombone called Frank's Wild Years.
Yeah, oh,
and then
really?
when Frank's Wild Years
Okay.
comes out, it's kind of like he took that story and blew it out into a full,
Oh, wow.
full thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, it really is. It's confusing as heck when you're
Right.
like, hey, Frank's Wild Years doesn't have the song Frank's Wild Years on it, but it's
Right.
it actually, after I picked this, and I was like, I'm still stoked for it because arguably Rain Dogs is his most interesting album.
Yeah.
But I'm such a fan of Frank's Wild Years, and it is an album that even among Tom Waits fans, like, is kind of got mixed opinions on it,
Yeah.
But I love that album so much. I'm like, oh, well, now maybe it doesn't make sense to talk about Frank's Wild Years in 1987 or whenever I think it came out. So, but that's okay. I'm just recommending all three of those albums are incredible. And that's like the period of Tom Waits I love the most.
This might sound kind of weird, but do you feel like you have to use a different part of your music appreciating brain to really enjoy this music in a way? Like, for me, when I was hearing it for the first time, I was kind of like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is kind of remarkable. Like, I've never heard music like this before. But the more and more I listened to it, I almost found it like exhausting. Not in a bad way, like not in a way that made me not want to listen to it, but felt like I had to kind of, it took a lot out of me.
Oh, yeah.
Listening to this album, listening to Rain Dogs, and listening to, Orphans even. So a lot of his albums I'm not all that familiar with. Like, I can't say that I've listened to Frank's Wild Years. I haven't listened to Swordfish Trombones. I've probably heard songs off of them.
Right.
But I don't know. It's maybe I'm alone in that camp. I'm not sure.
I think he's very... he is a very unique artist. Like, and it's not for. I've tried to play stuff for friends.
Yeah.
Here's the and I don't want to keep pulling this card like, well, as a musician, but I'm saying, like, as a musician, one thing is there's a lot of times you hear stuff that you've heard a million times before or something, or you're like, you try to get into it, but it's like, yeah, but this is, this is just a variation on 10 things I already know, or whatever.
Right.
And then someone like Tom Waits comes along, and it's not that these sounds didn't exist before Tom Waits. In some ways, the whole point of Tom Waits at this period in his career is taking these old sounds that have been lost for a long time. Like real quick, I'll circle back to this, but let me play a little bit of Clap Hands, just so you can hear the way the xylophones come in at the start of this.
Oh, yeah.
Which is moody as
Oh, my
hell.
God, yeah.
I mean,
And it's almost like it's percussive in a way that, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can say that this suggests, again, pre-rock musical forms,
Sure.
but really, vaudeville music hall didn't sound like this.
Not
It's
really.
sinister in a way that is
that's not
associated
agreed.
with
Agreed.
that. But you would never get this out of the rock era. You know what I mean?
Of course not. Of course
Even
not.
even that singing,
Yeah.
it's like he sounds older than he really is. You know, someone
So-
lost his way.
Yeah. So he says a Cincinnati jacket, and I can't remember what he says after that, but I kind of know what he's talking about because the jacket that the players wore back in probably the 70s or 80s, it just said Cincinnati across the chest, Cincinnati
Yeah.
Reds. So that's got to be the jacket he's talking about because it's just like their away uniforms said Cincinnati across them, and they had these red and white jackets that they'd wear when the weather got cold, like the managers and the coaching staff, and they just had Cincinnati emblazoned across it. So I feel like that he's talking about like some kind of drifter that came across a Cincinnati Reds jacket at a thrift store or something and is now wearing it. And like that's really cool. The first time I heard that, I remember thinking that and like building that person up in my head and like, who is that person?
And that
you know?
almost feels too like part of the beat poetry thing,
Absolutely.
right? Because like there's a line in Jockey Full of Bourbon where he's like, $2 pistol, but the gun won't shoot.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
and like
yeah.
I love that because it's sort of evocative of two things, right? Like a $2 pistol, like it's a cheap gun and it won't shoot.
Right.
But also, you know, it's like heroin paraphernalia, right? Like a $2 pistol would be like a $2 high that doesn't work or something, right? And so there's like these sort of dark layers to everything, and that reminds me of Ginsberg. Like that reminds me of Howl or something, you know, where it's like these little pieces of imagery that that in a way, like that whole poetic movement is sort of lost to time after a certain point. Like I don't know. It's and except here he is sort of bringing it back and mixing it with like accordion sounds from the 30s or something, or from the 20s even, you know, and weird stuff. And like I said, do you know much about Bertolt Brecht? Do you know
I don't know
you
if
probably
I've
know
ever
Mac
heard.
the Knife, but you probably don't know the original
Yeah.
Three Penny Opera version, because Mac the
Okay.
Knife, like it's not the version you're thinking of. He originally did on accordion, and it's very like, but you. I don't know, like the music that you imagine, let me just put it more like this. The music that you imagine them playing on an accordion in a French speakeasy in the 20s, like that kind of music is the kind of music that seems to influence all of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so I want to go back to your point. You say, is it exhausting, or do you think you have to use a different part of your musical mind?
Mm-hmm.
You do have to let go of a lot of your usual assumptions about what you want to hear when you listen to pop music.
Right. And that's
It's-
part of it. That was part of it for me, I think.
It's incredibly challenging. I played it for friends, and I played Alice for my buddy. I used to play it driving home. It was my car. We're listening to my music. We're going to listen to Alice, right?
Yeah.
And he would just be like, "Good grief! Like, how do you listen to this? You know?" It's like, and I'm like, I didn't even think it was that extreme. Alice, I would say, was probably one of his more accessible albums. You know?
Is, yeah, for sure.
But, you know,
of that period.
yeah, certainly
definitely.
more than Blood Money or something.
Yeah.
Like, Misery's the river of the world. You know,
Yeah.
it's not, you know, Alice has some pretty ballads and stuff on it,
Sure.
but it's just, I think it's just shocking. Do you think but the other thing to say is that he doesn't sing like that. If you've never heard of Tom Waits before, guys, I don't want you to think that he sings like Cookie Monster on every track. You know what I
doesn't.
mean?
That's
like
true.
he's got, that's part of the theater of it. Like sometimes he's got this like rough, growly voice.
Yeah.
Sometimes he sings very sort of proper. And although he doesn't have a voice as like clear as, you know, whatever your Bobby Darin or something,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
he does like, let's play a little bit of Time actually.
Yeah, let's do it.
Give you an idea of where he can go with this voice.
The smart money's on Harlem, and the moon is in the street, and the shadow boys are breaking all the laws.
So there's still a roughness to it,
Here
obviously,
east of East St. Louis,
but it's
the wind is
not like entirely this huge, overpowering,
Right.
gruff monster voice, right?
Yeah.
Or something like "Hang Down Your Head." I won't play that here, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that he's able to do with his
Well,
voice.
and you also on this album, you also have the song "Downtown Train," which would later be made wildly popular by the great Rod Stewart.
who we've never discussed before, but he
Yeah.
needs to go in the pantheon with Billy Joel of like
Yeah, he does.
artists that we bring up for no reason.
Yeah, I really like the Faces though.
Yeah, I think so
you
too.
know, the keyboardist that used to be in that band, he lived in Austin before he died. Ian McLagan.
Ian did? Okay, I didn't know he lived here.
for like 30 years, 25 years.
Yeah, I love Ichiku Park, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
there's some cool stuff. And Rod Stewart, I like Maggie May is a great track
Sure.
and everything.
Rod Stewart has some seriously redeeming qualities, I feel like.
But
a lot
it's
of
like
people knock him, but
because after about 1975, everything he puts out is garbage.
Yeah,
pretty much.
it's
Like that's
true.
the problem. You know,
Yeah.
it's not that he's one of those guys. I saw him on a list of like. And this was years ago before the internet, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
was like people who have squandered their talent, like musicians who have squandered their talent. And he was number one on the
Oh,
list.
my God.
And I've never gotten over that, but, you know, like
Yeah.
reading that at a formative age, because every time I listen to him, I'm like, yeah, that's true, you know? But he does have pretty good taste that he's singing a Tom Waits song
Yeah,
pretty early
yeah,
on, and he made a
yeah.
huge hit out of it.
He did.
Which kind of goes to show that he's one of those artists that some people will always think that other people's performances of his songs are better than
Yeah.
his, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a great, do you know the second Norah Jones album? Very good. It's a
don't.
pretty good record, actually. You
Really?
should check it out. But it's got a version of Long Way Home on it. And actually, that's
okay.
I don't know the full story, but I saw Norah Jones talking about how she ended up doing that song. It's like literally she doesn't know Tom Waits at all, and he just like calls her up. He's like, "I got a song for you to do on your next album, Norah. I'm going to send it to you."
It's gonna be great. Let me tell you.
But see, the thing I love about that story is it's just like he's looking for a mark, right? Because
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah.
she sold like 40
Yeah,
million copies of
yeah.
that first album.
Yeah.
Go make some money. Let's get her to sing.
Yeah, dude.
But then her version of Long Way
One of
Home.
my songs.
Yeah. Make me that money.
Singing the gravelly, like,
Always keep a diamond in your mind.
dude, talking in the gravelly Tom Waits voice is making me cough. And he doesn't even talk like that in real life. Like he's talked about his affinity with Bukowski, and he's in the Bukowski documentary, and he talks like this, man. Like, yeah, I remember reading Ham on Rye when I was, in my 20s,
Yeah.
and I thought it was great.
Actually, if you're not familiar with Tom Waits and you just want to go, well, I wonder what he sounds like, and you can't get to YouTube, just think about Heath Ledger's Joker performance, because that is
yeah.
Tom Waits.
That's
Like,
definitely Tom
it was
Waits.
hilarious, because even though I do think that's a great performance and he deserves credit for it, as a fan of Tom Waits, it was just
borrowed a lot
immediately
from that,
obvious. It's
yeah.
like, okay, it's just Tom Waits plays the Joker,
Pretty much, yeah.
But all of that, kill the Batman.
Yeah,
It's just just Tom Waits.
It
that's
is.
how he talks.
Yeah. Which is
But-
awesome.
Yeah, but do you think there's some value, all right, as a fan of Bukowski, right, or as someone who knows the beat poets and stuff? Like, what do you think about him as a kind of guy who has brought all that back and sort of synthesized that into his own thing? Do you think does that make it more appealing to you, or do you feel like it's kind of an ersatz version of it? Or
I would say it's more appealing in that regard, for sure.
Yeah.
When you say ersatz version, I don't know if I.
Well, I just mean, like, does it feel like he's just kind of copying it? That's the one thing
Oh,
that I
no.
sometimes wondered, where
Not
it's
at
like,
all.
oh, well,
it's incredibly authentic what he's doing, because he's not just doing that; he's doing it with like his own spin on it.
Right, that's true.
Like it's not,
it's that poetry mixed with a weird synthesis of all these early styles
Exactly.
and stuff.
And everybody's got influences. The thing that's great about Tom Waits is he took all those influences and he put a spin on it that hadn't really been done before, and that's what makes him unique, and that's what makes him sound like there's no music out there that actually sounds like him. So no, I don't think it diminishes anything at all.
Fantastic. I don't either. But
Yeah.
I've sometimes wondered if someone was like big into beat poetry or something, where they'd be like, well, okay, like, you can see, sometimes you can see the joins a little bit,
Right.
But it doesn't bother me.
No, me neither. Absolutely not. you know?
Ginsberg wasn't barking to an accordion,
Yeah,
Like,
right,
it's-
right. Yeah, it's true, man.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Rain Dogs specifically then.
Okay,
So,
okay.
I probably heard this album shortly. So this is definitely the album of Tom Waits that probably gets the most truck that people bring up a lot. Like, oh yeah, Rain Dogs. That's that's the big one.
Yeah.
And consequently, it took me a while to cycle around to it, because it was like, I think I got that compilation. I got Alice. I got Blood Money. I got Frank's Wild Years, and then probably Swordfish Trombones, and then Rain Dogs. So it
wow.
eventually got it. So I just wanted to say as an example, like I was kind
So
of
you came to
hesitant.
this later.
Well, I was
Almost.
still would have been that would have been still within a short period of time
Sure.
because I was kind of ravenous for it. I would have
Yeah.
probably got into him 2001, 2002,
Yeah.
something like that. Well, I mean, I heard "Hold On" in '98 or '99, so I mean, technically, it'd be about like that. But
Yeah.
so I've been living with these albums for a long time, and
Yeah.
they've never really left my rotation.
Sure.
I will listen to Rain Dogs at a drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Now, talking about how he actually recorded it. So this was recorded, was it in L.A.? And I think of him as an L.A. guy, even though
I do
you're right,
too.
he sort of seems everywhere. I
Yeah.
looked into it, and I didn't find I didn't look too hard, I guess. It probably is out there somewhere, but I presume he recorded it in L.A.
I think so. Yeah. I'm kind of glossing through some stuff right now. Let's see.
I know, though, that... when I think of Tom Waits in the studio, basically I think of him like banging 2x4s together in the bathroom, with a microphone swinging around over his
Right.
head. Like the actual sounds of the record are so strange.
So I read this when I was researching for this episode, and I want to read it right now. It's just off the Wikipedia for this album. I'll full disclosure, but this really struck me as being completely Tom Waits, and I kind of and again after reading this, I was almost like transported there to the place he was talking about. So this is not the recording process, but it says Watts. I apologize. Waits wrote the majority of the album in a 2-month stint in the fall of 1984 in a basement room at the corner of Washington and Horatio Streets in Manhattan. According to Watts, it was, quote, kind of a rough area, lower Manhattan between Canal and 14th Street, just about a block from the river. It was a good place for me to work, very quiet except for the water coming through the pipes every now and then, sort of like being in a vault. So this album was written in a bank vault, pretty much.
basically.
Recorded street...
And then you never know if that's even true,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the other thing. Like I love is who knows? It's probably true.
That's
but-
probably true. I mean, it would be
Yeah.
kind of weird to make that up, but yeah, totally. So, let's see.
But I know. He brought in some ringers to play guitar. on this. And
three big ones.
Three
too,
really
right?
big ones. Let's talk about the biggest one first. So he brings in Keith Richards,
yeah.
right?
Jockey full of... Wait.
No, it's on Big Black Mariah.
Yeah.
And I think there's another one that he's on, maybe Gun Street Girl or something. But let's hear a little bit of Big Black
let's do
Mariah
it.
just to get that's a great track. Song about a hearse. Again, going back, like, what's a Mariah? What's a Big Black Mariah? Like,
Yeah.
you have to look it up.
Yeah,
Only
yeah.
Tom Waits knows what that is, but it's a
Exactly.
hearse, and it's an old phrase for a hearse from the freaking 20s or something.
So crazy.
But that's my man Keith. And then again, like those, like, what is that? You know,
Yeah.
it sounds like someone kicking a cupboard over
It
or
does.
something.
The
It's
percussion is crazy.
Here come the big
Black Mariah.
We'll play a little bit more of that, but just to, yeah. So you can get an idea that he just will. But it's cool that he brought Keith in for something like that because it's got kind of a bluesy
Yeah,
feel. But
it
even for
does.
Keith, it's kind of
Yeah.
It doesn't quite feel like it's Tom Waits does a Rolling Stones song. Or
You
anything.
can tell it's Keith playing, but yeah, he's not playing like this is not him like regurgitating like Brown Sugar or something.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's funny because he said this about playing with Keith. This is another Tom Waits quote, and forgive me for reading this verbatim, but I think that it's definitely worth sharing. I was trying to explain Big Black Mariah, and finally I started to move in a certain way. And he said, "Oh, why didn't you do that to begin with?" Now I know what you're talking about. It's like Animal Instinct. So they were kind
wow.
of like communicating on these weird bass instinct levels, which I thought was really interesting.
And that's one cool thing. Say what you want about the Rolling Stones.
going like this, Keith.
And he said, "Oh, well, in fairness, Keith has spent his entire career working with Mick Jagger. I think wiggle your butt, and then it's like, oh, that's the kind of song you want. I get it, No, but I mean, say what you will about Keith Richards, right? And I've probably said it as a Beatles fan, but he understands this kind of vibe like inherently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he's a perfect match for Tom Waits.
Chris took me to the cleaners the other day for liking the album "Some Girls" by Rolling Stones because it has a disco song on it apparently, and I was probably I like I think one of my
can like
favorite
that album.
one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs is on that album, Beast or Burden. It's
Yeah,
one of my
and that
favorites.
is a great
It's
song. Like, it's unbreakable. I'm not gonna go hard
it's
against that.
bulletproof. But I think that maybe I don't know that album as well as I think I did, and I kind of was like, yeah, it's a great album. You were like, Marty, come on, like,
Yeah, it's got Shattered on it, which is just the worst thing ever. I love, like, I've read, like, fans, like, music critics, because there are music critics who, you know, the Rolling Stones could never release something bad, like, defend Shattered. And it's like, it's awful. It's awful.
I need to. I have it on vinyl too. I have that record.
I Miss You is a great song. That's their disco song, and it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I really don't like hate that album, but I was just, you know, we don't need to talk.
I'm sorry
we will
to-
get to the Rolling Stones.
Sorry
at some
to
point.
pull that in,
I don't
but I
want to
just
seem
thought
like
that
I
was-
dislike the Rolling Stones. I really do like them. I'm sometimes a little cavalier about
Whatever,
them,
Chris.
but I will put on. Hey, I said they're a great singles act.
You're like, the Rolling Stones are a singles band, Marty. Come on.
Come on, they're the '60s version of Stone Temple Pilots. That's
Wow.
not really how I feel, folks.
Yeah.
But it's fun to.
It's funny.
whine
Yeah,
about.
I get what you're saying though. But
Right. So
Anyway.
but then they do have some great albums.
sure.
So Keith is one of the guys that are on this record.
Yes.
The big one, the probably the guitarist most associated with Tom Waits, especially through this period, is Mark Ribot.
Yeah.
And I love Mark Ribot's guitar playing. It's influenced my own guitar playing. What I say about Mark Ribot is he's kind of like, he sounds like what you would think would happen if punk came to jazz
Yeah.
before it came to rock.
Yeah.
Right? He's got this like weird angularity to it. It's rooted in jazz, but it's very simplistic.
Yeah.
And it's in your face, you know.
Yeah.
But it's not really punk rock guitar playing either.
It's really strange, and he has collaborated with John Zorn, if you know him.
Right, yeah.
John Zorn,
Horn
who has
player.
also collaborated with Mike Patton.
Yeah,
who we've
exactly.
Talked about.
Yep.
And he's also played with a murderer's row of amazing musicians and bands like Jack McDuff, Wilson Pickett, McCoy Tyner, Elton John, Sam Phillips, Allen Ginsberg, Tift Merritt, T-Bone Burnett. Like, the names just keep going up and up and up and up. And I can't believe that I've heard this name before, but I never really put my finger on his prowess as a musician and a guitarist. And he is a very accomplished player. His work has touched on many styles, including no wave, free jazz, and rock, and Cuban music. This guy is like
He's
insanely
really versatile
Yeah.
and weird, like
Yeah.
all over the place. And his, I've heard some of his solo records, instrumental jams, you know, basically, and they're great too. You know, like very good, like compositionally, and just a perfect fit with Tom Waits.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that I think it's that versatility probably. You know, it's like, you want me to play with some guy, you know, banging a marimba with their ass? Sure,
no
you know.
problem.
Yeah, you know, I'll find a way to put a guitar solo on that.
Do you know Scott Walker? Are you familiar with him or his music?
No, I guess not.
He's a very interesting guy, but he had this. There's a documentary that me and this girl I was dating years ago when I first moved to Austin, she really wanted to see this documentary, and they were playing at the Alamo, so we went, and it was a really good documentary, but he had this idea of percussion that kind of reminds me of Tom Waits a little bit. Like the percussion parts, he was like slapping like meat or something to get like a
Right.
drum beat or something like that, and it was like literally like a side of beef he had in the studio, and he was just like slap. It was so bizarre, but so interesting. Like I don't know, but
I think that sort of unusual percussion is a huge thing for Tom Waits. Like if you want
Yeah.
to try to, if we were going to try to figure out how to get the Tom Waits sound here in this room,
Yeah.
like I don't know if I'd slap a side of beef. We could go downstairs and see if we've got any hamburger or something. But you're right, you know, like
get
it's-
the Thanksgiving turkey.
you get
out,
that
man.
turkey.
It's
Just like, what's the sound of that? Just pulling the turkey leg off.
seriously, that's.
I mean, it
Like,
really
I
is.
want to get my recorder on that, man. Like, you know,
Yeah,
dude.
And then, if it were really Tom Waits, then it would be tied in conceptually somehow. Like even at the end of Singapore, there's a thunder clap
Clap.
that sounds right, and that's been done before. I mean, that's at the beginning. Going back to the girl groups, it's the beginning of a Shangri-La song, right? That's not totally unheard of, but thematically it fits in with the Rain Dogs, right?
Sure.
And this is so a rain dog. It's funny because I actually taught Evie what a rain dog is because she asked me. She was like, "What are we listening to?"
Yeah.
Because she listens to the weirdest music. She doesn't even know it. She just thinks it's normal, right?
Really? That's God,
Well,
you're
yeah,
raising
because
her right.
I'm
man.
raising her.
God.
She's going to be like 6 years old. It's going to be like something from the Hard Times, right? She's going to be
Seriously,
6 years
yeah.
old. She's going to be, what is all this? These nursery rhymes.
Yeah,
you know?
like, well, this
you
is-
guys don't listen to Daniel Johnston's Walking the Cow. She's
Yeah,
that's
it's like
not normal.
when we have kids, Courtney's gonna have like Flying Lotus on and stuff, and our kid's gonna be like, what is this Imagine Dragons crap? Why isn't there
Yeah.
like weird time signatures and horns and all kinds of crap going all over the place?
Right,
It's like,
right.
That's good, man. It's good to know that can
that
be
we're
done.
keep Austin weird. That's all I
Yeah,
say. Keep Evie weird.
Yeah.
But she was asking me like, we're listening to this. What is this music? I said, oh, this is Rain Dogs.
Yeah.
And she was like, what's a rain dog? And I was like, well, a rain dog
God.
is a dog that ventures really far away from home,
Yeah.
and then when it rains, they can't. And I kind of gave a 4-year-old's version. I said they can't smell their way back home again.
Oh man, that's
And
awesome.
she's like, so they get lost. And she's
Yeah.
like, really? Well, how do they get found? And I said, well, I guess someone's got to go find them. And,
yeah,
and that was
yeah.
that's the story. But that is what
so
a rain
good,
dog
man.
is basically. This is, and it's not just this album. If you're going to say that it's a part of a trilogy, that's definitely a theme of those 3 albums.
Yeah.
That people who go out and raise hell and get lost on their way and can't
Yeah,
get home again,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And that's a very like Tom Waits style
Yeah.
idea. And just telling that story in multiple different ways. I mean, that's not the only story that's on these albums, but
Sure.
but having sympathy for these people, and figuring out who are you after you've done things that have changed you, and now you have regrets, or you have the inability to get back, or losses, or something
Right.
like that. And this album comes to grip with that a lot.
Yeah, totally.
So, but my original point was to say that thunderclap happens, and it's like it's not just there for mood; it's there to kind of push forward that theme that we're
Right.
talking about.
Right.
These kinds of people that the people who pour into Singapore, sailors probably, aren't going to be able to get home again the same people they were.
Yeah.
and that's that.
Yeah. They're
So
gonna see some dark shit while they're in it.
exactly, yeah. And the people back home aren't going to be able to relate to what they've seen.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful and damaged and interesting. And
Exactly.
you know what
And
I
it's
mean?
like-
And he's the poet of that
Yeah.
kind of experience.
It's like my brother-in-law went to Thailand when he was in the Navy, and they ported in Phuket. He was on a ship for like 6 months, and Phuket was the one big stop they made, and he was telling me about it, and he brought me back all this crazy stuff from the streets of Phuket, like a bootleg Rolex and stuff. It was awesome. And he was just kind of talking about like, it's like you gotta like kind of hang out. I hung out with all the married guys because I was married, and like obviously to my sister, but he was like, some of the things these single guys were doing, Marty, it's unspeakable. Like he was it's just I can't even begin to tell you the kind of darkness and brooding intensity that goes into like what happens when single sailors have been on a ship for 6 months and they port in Phuket, and it's just
Yeah.
like, forget about it, dude.
Yeah, you probably don't
All
want
bets
to know.
are off. It's
Right.
yeah.
And what I love is it's not Tom Waits isn't about the decadence necessarily. Not even in like Singapore. It's not about
No,
like the
of course
darkness of this is completely understood.
It's
by
not like
Waits.
there's like hookers and cocaine and drug, like no, there's nothing gratuitous about it. I agree.
Yeah, it's more about the I don't know. He's just finding something dark and like the Reaper Bond and places like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
he
he's finding-
broaches darkness without being like very insidious about it. Like he approaches darkness in this very poetic way that your mom could listen to. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like really dark music, and he sounds like the Cookie Monster, but he's not like a rapper talking about fucking bitches and doing blow.
Well,
and
and this goes back to what I was saying about the artificialness of this stuff being a quality that I really like about it. It's theatrical. It's, you might as well get on to him, like let's say you were going to pass judgment on Singapore, right? The themes of Singapore.
Right,
Like,
right.
and I'm not even trying to do that, but let's say you were going to say, why would you like a song about a bunch of sailors, getting up to their nasty business in Singapore?
Yeah.
Think of the children, but the point is that, it's like what you were saying about The Sopranos on the last episode, right?
Yeah.
Like he's writing them almost like a playwright would write about them, and he's sympathizing them the way a novelist would sympathize with them.
Exactly.
And so the actual voice in the song itself, and a lot of people play with artificiality, but like take something like Nirvana, right? Like not every, like when Kurt Cobain did Polly, like he wasn't saying I'm that guy, right? But he was finding a way to tell a story about that guy, right?
Yeah.
But most of the time when you think about Kurt Cobain, you imagine that the songs are coming from him somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with Tom Waits, they come from his brain, obviously, but they don't seem to speak about Tom Waits the person.
Right.
And a lot of we also talked about Mumford and Sons a little while back, and all that, the Lumineers and all that sort of phony baloney authenticity, where it's like, oh, you play a banjo and suddenly that means you're authentic, right?
Right. Yeah.
I love that. Like, if you ask me, is Tom Waits authentic? I'd be like, get out of here. Like, who cares? Like, it's that's a meaningless term with this guy.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because my best friend Graham, who I've brought up a couple of times, his second album, Beggar's Blues, he has this song called Cincinnati, where we grew up, and he's telling the story about this relationship, and he's talking about like going ice skating on Fountain Square and stuff, and a lot of our friends, and maybe I even did too, approached him and kind of asked him like, who was the girl you were dating in that song? And he was like, it's just a song, man. Like, that's not about me. It's a character. It's a song. It's a narrative. Like, and I think my friend, I don't know who our other friend was that asked him like, well, when did you go ice skating on Fountain Square? He's like, I've never been ice skating on Fountain Square. It's like, I just thought that's what people in relationships did. And it was so great the way he answered that question. And it is a great, great song, but the song right after that is a song called On Too Long, which is quite possibly my favorite song he's ever written. Not that he hasn't written, he's a great songwriter, but that song is just fantastic. It's so good. But yeah, I think a lot of people have a lot of problems separating the art from the artist, I guess, for lack of a better term. That might not have sounded the way I wanted it to sound, but people think that, this is who this guy is. The guy that wrote this song is the subject of the song, and he docked in Singapore and did all this dingy, dark bullshit. And it's just a song. It's just a character, man. Like,
right.
I don't know.
I totally agree. But I want to go back to the other thing that's weird is that when we think of artificiality in music, like if you just said to me, Chris, what's the greatest artificiality in music? Like, what's the greatest band that traffics in artificiality? I'd be like, like Kraftwerk or something.
Yeah.
Like I would think of
Rise of the Robots kind of thing.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. But in a way, it shows that like authenticity doesn't have to be driven by technology.
No,
or questions of whether something's authentic or not isn't about the instrumentation. It's something about the artists themselves.
Absolutely.
And artificiality can be a strength. Yeah. And I think in Kraftwerk's case it is, and I think in Tom Waits' case it is.
Can be a huge downfall too.
It can be. Well, it depends on what we're doing with artificiality, right? And let me say, I don't think that Tom Waits' music is artificial in the sense that he's communicating ideas that I'm sure he's passionate about.
Yeah.
But it's that Tom Waits, the man, gets lost in communicating those ideas.
Right.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah,
especially as a songwriter, I love that.
Yeah, he gets lost in like his own little world in a lot of cases. Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more, and I think that's what makes you wanting to keep. I think that's what makes you want to turn on that other part of your brain and listen to what he can come up with for sure.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, totally.
So, and I hope that didn't steer anyone wrong when I said that. I was not trying to say that it was like arduous for me to do that. It certainly isn't, but you listen to this music and you really kind of have to give a different part of yourself to it, I think.
I think that's fair. We just talked about how you're going to be challenged if you listen to Jesus and Mary Chain's
because of the
Candy.
treble and all that.
Yeah, it's like it's like there are aesthetic choices on that you're not used to hearing. I think that's also true about this album. Yeah. I don't know what was going on in 1985, but like there was something where
where big bold choices like this were
Right.
being made,
Right.
and both of these are fantastic albums, but both of them are albums that, you know, if you walk in unprepared, if you're just like, hey, I love Chris and Marty, and they haven't steered me wrong yet, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they like that Sam Cooke, you know, like it's
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
you know, these are going to be a little bit harder maybe for you
Yeah.
to digest, but totally worth your time if you do digest them.
for sure.
Third ringer on this guitar player, just real quick, Robert Quine is also on this. So you'll know Robert Quine from the Voidoids.
Richard Hell's band.
Richard
yeah.
Hell, you know, so that's him playing those crazy, one of my favorite little clips in the history of music, the intro to Love Comes in Spurts.
Yeah.
You want to talk about angular guitar player.
Man.
That's some of the most angular stuff ever. But he's almost like the flip side of the coin with Mark Ribot as far as like that sort of weird punk energy that he brings to the tracks that he's on.
Should we play a little bit of it?
You want to play it? Yeah, go
do
for it. I mean, does that not define angular punk rock guitar player?
Yeah. Would
And
this have been-
Quine.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Would this have been before or after Gang of Four? Gang of Four Entertainment was 79.
Yeah, it would have been before.
Okay. So I think that that kind of intervenes with kind of crosses paths with that, but that's a whole
Absolutely.
whole other
Yeah,
topic.
Gang of Four is so good.
Oh
too,
my
you know,
god.
like, Love's like a case of anthrax. They should tour with Tom Waits. That would make a lot. Do you know Tom Waits opened for Frank Zappa?
Oh, I'm not surprised by that. at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. They hated him. The Zappa audience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I don't think Zappa probably loved him. But
Yeah, well,
but-
it's just kind of like the different version of weird. You know, it's like
Yeah.
Frank Zappa is all the way on the right weird, and Tom Waits is like all the way on the left weird. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's like polar opposites of strange, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And well, with Tom Waits, I mean, you know, Frank Zappa had all these weird time signatures and songs starting and stopping, and just kind of this really frenetic kind of pace to his songs, and you know. Or wait, did I say Frank Zappa? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was-
and then Tom Waits is very much like, you know, he has these kind of very strange ways of writing music, but they're all like regular songs that have more structure to them. You know what I'm saying? Does that make
yeah,
sense?
no, I agree. He's not as much of an experimenter in form or anything. He's, you know, it's verse chorus a lot of the times. It's, you know, singing
Well,
about girls a lot.
And
you know?
Frank Zappa always said that like he didn't care about the lyrics. Like he just wrote lyrics because he knew that people wanted to listen to music that had lyrics in it. Like he would have made just instrumental albums if he could have. But like he was like, yeah, I'm just gonna have all these amazing musicians in my band. We're gonna play this weird fucking music, and I'm gonna talk about like not eating the yellow snow and
yeah,
you know,
titties and beer.
yeah,
yeah, it's like-
exactly, yeah. So
yeah, but it's amazing to think of like those guys playing on the same bill. That must have
yeah,
been a crazy
oh,
show.
absolutely, man.
But cool. Well, you mentioned that some stuff about Cemetery Polka got under
Yeah.
your skin. What do you
I
think?
don't know,
You want to hear a little
like-
bit of that one?
Yeah, let me cue it up.
Independent as
A real person, Uncle Vernon, apparently.
He's a big shot down there at the slaughterhouse. Plays accordion for Mr. Rice.
I don't know. I feel like
Yeah, you feel.
I don't know. I just feel like that song is kind of like I'm trying to think of the best way to actually communicate my feelings about that song, but I almost feel like it's a Disney movie version of the songs on the rest of this album. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why. I just
Is it that weird beat or whatever? Or they
kind
just,
of, yeah. I think it's maybe the
Maybe it's just
keyboard in
too
it.
theatrical,
Yeah,
too,
it's a
isn't
little
it?
bit too much for me at times. I think. Like,
Yeah. He's
okay,
got this mode that he's in sometimes. He does it again. I keep mentioning Kamenitsu Spate from
Yeah.
Alice, but he kind of does that again.
Right.
There's everything you can think of is true. You know,
Yeah,
like there's
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be like just an assault on the ears.
Exactly. And it's not even that. Like, there are times when I really want to hear that song.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying I don't listen to it or I don't like some qualities about it. There's just something about it that I don't feel like it. I feel like yes, it does fit with the rest of the themes of the album, but it doesn't really, what's the best way to say this? Like, it feels like it's kind of, you know how I was talking about, it was either Weezer or another band, but how like the Make Believe Weezer album almost sounds like a Weezer cover band.
Yeah.
You know, making an album of original cover songs or original Weezer songs, excuse me.
We've discussed
Yeah,
that.
and I don't want to say that's what this is, but that's kind of teetering towards that, I feel like.
I can see that.
little
I mean, I
bit,
don't think
you
it's
know?
anybody's favorite song off of Rain Dogs. You
No,
know what I mean?
no.
Like, but it does. You know, I still like that mode when he's in it,
Yeah.
and I'll love a crazy old polka, you know, like
Sure.
polka or whatever. I got a polka band picture hanging on the wall over there. You
yeah.
ever notice that back there? The Biscuit String Band?
I actually noticed that the last time I was here. Didn't you tell me that's like relatives of yours? Or
That's relatives of Staffs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's maybe we could get that up on Instagram for this episode. But it's a
Biscuit
great
String
the
Band.
Biscuit String Band, not Biscuit Wheels, Biscuit String Band.
Biscup. No, I had it with a P because I remember reading it.
Yeah,
Like, this is
yeah.
interesting.
What I love about it, they were a polka band. They were like a Czech polka band,
Okay,
and related to Steph. And what I love is they're called the Biscuit String Band. There's a drummer, 2 accordion players, and 1 violin. I guess the violin player, he's what makes it a string band.
It's one string.
One string.
You know, and I mean that's not that many. There's not a lot of string. Like,
No, not a lot of string.
let's be
Well,
honest
it didn't
here.
say Biscuit Strings Band, so maybe that's it.
So
you know.
string band. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, as far as Rain Dogs, that's mainly what I want to say about it. Just that I love it. I love the theater of it. I think it's a lot of fun as a record, and I think Tom Waits. It's a good place to get introduced to Tom Waits.
You think
I
so? I would agree with that.
I came to it later, so there's other places
Yeah.
you can start, but I think this is a pretty good place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that this album kind of, you know, from an accessibility standpoint, it is accessible. I remember when I was playing this when we were researching this episode. I was playing this album in the car, and Courtney was with me, and I put Singapore on, and she was like, "What is this? Oh my god!" And it's Tom Waits. It's, you know, this is kind of like one of his Cookie Monster albums. That's how I said it, which is not really even true. I kind of feel shitty for saying that. It's just maybe that song, Singapore, and maybe like 1 or 2 other songs on this album. I mean, you know, it has Downtown Train on it, you know?
Yeah. It's got time on it. It's got
time
hang
on
down
it.
your head
Yeah,
on it. You know,
yeah.
like these are songs that are much more sort of pitched toward the middle, you know.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah.
But, you know, I'll say this, like I'm more of a fan of mid to late period Tom Waits than the early period. The early period for a lot of people, like there are tons of people say, oh, you want to listen to Tom Waits, start with Closing Time. Start with Heart of
Really?
Saturday Night.
Yeah.
You know, because on those he sounds like Tom Waits dialed down to 10 mixed with like 70s singer-songwriter stuff,
yeah.
right?
Asylum Records, you know, like what was the there was a venue where all those cats played in the 70s, and like the first time Elton John played in the US, he played there. What is the name of that? The Troubadour in LA.
Oh,
in
right.
LA. Yeah.
I think he even
So-
mentions the Troubadour.
Yeah,
as
he
a-
does. So
a
it's
song,
like back then it was like Carly Simon and, you know, all those cats were playing there.
Probably
James Taylor.
James Taylor, yeah,
and,
that's-
the first time Elton John played in the US, he played at the
that
Troubadour.
Laurel Canyon thing, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of those
for
guys. who
sure.
played there.
Yeah, and Linda Ronstadt too.
Mm-hmm.
She was a regular there. It must have been cool. You know, can you
Yeah.
imagine being in LA in the early 70s and just going to the Troubadour on a Wednesday night and seeing Elton John? Are you fucking serious? Like that kind of thing doesn't exist anymore. I feel like you know.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's L.A. I've never been to L.A. You know, James Rawson from work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So Rawson's from L.A. and he
Oh,
was
is he
telling me
really?
the
I
other
didn't
day.
know
I don't
that.
want to tell James's stories here. Maybe we'll have him on sometime because
Sure.
he's a great, like, a huge jazz buff and everything, and knows
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot about music. He collects
Yeah.
Blue Note records and stuff. But
I've seen him in a Blue Note Records like T-shirt before.
Oh yeah.
or
No, he's
something like
apparently
that.
really
Yeah.
into it and stuff, and he's
Yeah.
fun to talk to about music and loves Sonic Youth and all kinds of cool
Sure,
stuff.
sure.
But he was talking about like he went to someone's. He was like, someone's like, oh, you want to come over and hang out with my friend Hope this weekend? We're gonna go do something. And it was like Hope Sandoval from Mazzy Star, and he was just
What?
like, we're just hanging out with Hope Sandoval, and like one of their friends had an album that just came out, so they played it or whatever,
Oh
or
my
like it was about to
God.
release. And he was like, that's L.A. You know, you're just
Yeah.
gonna like. People who like it's easy for us to say, oh, that doesn't exist anymore, but maybe it does, and we just
Yeah.
can't see it yet. You know,
Exactly.
like or we're
Yeah.
just kind of far out of it.
Right.
It kind of can happen in Austin in a way, not in
Yeah.
a big way, but
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story about like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like hanging out at a party in Matthew McConaughey. showed
Yeah,
up,
well-
or- that's not so it's the same thing, but you know,
Yeah.
like.
I went to McDonald's and Daniel Johnston
Daniel
served me my Big Mac. Back in the 90s, man, I used to go to the Dobie Mall every day.
Yeah, way to go. Yeah.
I'd get the double cheeseburgers meal and then go to the comic book store.
It's like,
Oh my God, we're never gonna stop being fixated on Daniel Johnston working at McDonald's.
No,
it's just too good.
It's too good of a story, and it's so like such an American story.
It
in a way,
really
like,
is, yeah.
like an Austin story. Like here's this guy who is
arguably
one of the
misunderstood genius.
Yes,
yeah,
and he's got to work at McDonald's.
Yeah.
But you know what I love about that
doesn't
story
even
too?
own a phone. I shouldn't be laughing. Like, this is terrible.
It's like awful.
This is the guy that wrote "True Love Will Find You in the End,"
and he's having to sling hash browns.
God,
you know what I mean? Like he could have slung hash browns to me. You know what I mean?
I'm
Like
sure
I
he
wouldn't have
did
known
many
who
times.
he was back then.
Of course not.
You know,
and that's part of the fun thing about music is you can. And this is the guy from Maynard from Tool. He used to say, like, I love, we always used to make videos and not put the band in the video, it would just be weird animation and stuff. And like, it's great because I can go out and watch the opening band and nobody knows who I am when we play live, that kind of thing. And it's kind of maybe not the best example, although I have to say I like that band. I think they're really good.
I had Undertow when it first came out, and Sober was a really like awesome track.
Yeah.
Guys who are into Tool are often really into Tool, so I've never quite broke into it, but I never disrespect it. You know what I mean?
And
just like
it sucks because they kind of have this loose affiliation with like cock rock and bro rock and almost new metal, and like a lot of the people that like that music also like Tool, and it's it's kind of unfair, I think, because
I don't think of them as like in the same category with Korn or anything, but I do think a lot of people who like that music like Tool as well.
I mean, they're closer to like a jam band than they are to any of that new metal stuff. Almost, I feel like if you listen to like Lateralis or something, it's like, the drumming is just absolutely crazy on those albums, man. Like Danny Carey is like kind of like a jazz heavily influenced by like Buddy Rich and stuff.
Anyway, guys, check it out. Definitely check out Tom Waits. Check out Rain Dogs if you love it. Let us know if it's too much for you. Just roll back and listen to that Jesus and Mary Chain. You can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong, man. So also the Jesus and Mary Chain, their most recent album, it's called, what is it called? I've been listening to it nonstop for the past 2 days, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, man.
So
like they are so good at like putting together just an awesome like straightforward verse chorus song. You know what I mean? Like, have you heard Stoned and Dethroned? Did you listen to that track talking about Hope Sandoval that they did with her? Gotta check it out, man.
No, I did not. The song with Sky Ferreira is on the their Damage and Joy is what their new album is called, and it's so good. There's a song that's about Ted Kennedy, the El Chappaquiddick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's two.
If anyone can, a Kennedy can. That's how the song starts out.
Wow. So that's kind of
kinda
2 episodes in a row of
Vampire
Vampire Weekend when we're
yeah.
talking about Ted Kennedy.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. Okay. Dying young.
Dying young. Yeah. It's crazy stuff. Anyway,
so I think we're.
Yeah.
I'm. I think that's enough.
Great. Yeah. Where are we at?
We're at like over 3 hours now. So we.
Oh, geez. Is that an hour?
Yeah.
Of Tom Waits?
Yeah.
Fuck, that didn't feel like an hour
it didn't.
at all, man.
It didn't.
That flew by.
That's the way this works, man. I mean, part of the reason why I was scaling it back is you said that you could talk about Tribe Called Quest for like 3 days straight.
You can talk about
I can
Tom
talk
Waits.
about Tom Waits. I bought accordions because I like Tom Waits so much. So
well, when you're moving on biscuit wheels, this is what happens, Chris.
It moves fast, man.
It moves by pretty fast.
Very, very good.
Awesome.
All right, folks. Well, do you got anything you want to say as we're
No,
headed
just check out social media as always at AOTY Podcast.
Oh, I do want to say that we've kind of we're doing some more things with the Spotify account too.
Yeah, we are.
So you may have noticed last time with the mixtapes, we've got. If you didn't see that, we didn't mention it on the actual podcast for last week. Maybe a bit of a mix up, but we do have like a best of mixtapes.
We do. Yeah. So Chris and I, to kind of. Go alongside a companion piece, if you will, for the mixtapes minisode. We both have Spotify playlists that are the best of our mixtapes, the best of our personal mixtapes that we've made for ourselves and other people, and we're pretty happy with them. I'd say,
it's pretty cool.
Pretty good.
I mean, it's definitely a limited pool of music to pull from, so
Yeah.
it's not like a mixtape that I would make for you now.
Exactly.
It's definitely like, hey, here's my tastes from 1991 to 2000 for me.
yeah.
And I think yours is maybe a little bit later, but not much.
Yeah, 2000s probably, but still. You know?
Yeah, so it's kind of fun to go back and when I was listening to these tapes, I just kind of pop them in and it'd be like playing in the background or something. And like there was a song by this group called The Indians that I had completely forgotten about, and it came on and I was like, whoa,
yeah, it's crazy.
It's called Look Up at the Sky, and it's like a thing like it's obscure track. No one, like, I don't even know the history of this band, but I was like
Indians,
the Indians, yeah, was the name of the group. So check that out.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're doing some more experimental stuff. I've had a suggestion that we try to make a playlist that lays out some of the stuff that we talk about in the actual episodes.
Right.
So we're going to try that. So if there
like
were
a chronological kind of thing.
Yeah. I've put it together for the mixtape episode, so you may have seen that already. If not, there should be one for this one. I'll put it together at some point before we release it. But I think that could be a lot of fun, to listen to. The mixtapes one turned out to be pretty cool because
it was great, man.
Yeah.
I had so much fun doing that. Not that I don't have fun doing this, because this is a blast every time we get to do this. It's great, but the mixtapes episode was just so organic, and it felt easy. It felt so good. Yeah. It was great. It was fantastic.
It was so much fun. So if you haven't checked out those old episodes, check those out.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about social media and play us out, folks.
At AOTY Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook has been badgering me to make a Facebook account, so I probably will end up succumbing to the Facebook gods, fucking Mark Zuckerberg. Fine, I'll do it. So I'll try and get the Facebook page out within the next week or so. But yeah, let us know what you think, guys. And at aotypodcast@gmail.com, we can always be reached at that email address. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear what you think. So have a great week, and thank you guys for listening.
Have a great one.